My best friend is gonna be a dad in the same time than me and I hate it. Edit, I'll put this edit in the beginning so that I'm sure you'll read it. Reading through the comments here really helped me to get back to reality. I'm going to have a kid FFS. One of the best advice I've read here was that I do not have a do-over on this one. This is my one and only time that I'm going to have a first kid and I'm totally ruining my experience with those thoughts. I'll speak to my therapist for sure, but you guys have already helped me a lot. Thanks. I feel like a terrible person for feeling that way. I hate everything about and it makes me a very bad friend. Here is some context. My friend and I always had the same interests in many things. He also always had a financial situation better than mine, and loves to have nice things. This creates situations where whenever I have something, he has the better one. Like, for example, I just bought a good computer, a couple months later he shows up with a better one. A nice great camera with a nice lens? He'll get the newer more advanced one. Anything I'll have he'll have it too but just better. I don't want to believe he does it on purpose, we just have the same interests and he has more money so it does just make sense. Anyway, this became a running joke between my wife and I. For a long time, I was having a successful relationship with her, and he was struggling to keep a girlfriend. So when he finally found the one, 10 months ago, we joked about it because she was a single mom with had a 5-year-old daughter. So we joked that okay, he had to one-up you on this as well, you're married to me so he had to find someone that would push him to the next step immediately. And so that was the joke for everything, and it was just a joke. When we decided to try for a baby, we joked about it too, you'll see that when I'll be pregnant he'll show up with twins. Well, you read the title. When I knew I was going to be a dad, I was very excited and I told him the news. I was feeling great about it, I was thinking this would be an amazing moment. Him and his girlfriend asked question, she gave us advices, they were great. And at some point, well, he or she is going to have a friend I guess. And now I hate myself for the following, I was crushed inside. It was no longer a special announcement, it became another thing we'd have in common. I stayed polite and played along but I was not happy at all about it. They didn't plan to do it. They didn't do it just because we wanted one. It just happened. And yet I have this feeling that it's exactly what happened. He went in his 30s with no stable relationship, met someone just to move in with her kid 3 months later, then have a kid with her not even a year into their relationship. I hate every single word that I wrote in this post. Since he announced the news to me, I don't want to speak about it at all with him, I barely want to talk to him, and I'm just focusing on my wife and my future kid. I put all my energy into her. Just I don't have anyone to share my joy with now, and it's my fault. Now, he comes up to me telling me everything he plans, the shopping he's gonna do for the baby, the doctor's appointments, and I don't want to tell what I'm doing or what we're planning because that's gonna be something he'll compare and comment about. Just yesterday he told me that it looked like I didn't care about the first ultrasound appointment just because I said that I cared more about knowing that the baby is okay than seeing the pictures, because I don't think I'll be able to understand what I'll be seeing anyway. I took it very wrong and blocked him. Let me analyze the story for you. This story is a raw and layered reflection on the nature of envy, identity, and the fragile boundaries of male friendship when shaped by unspoken competition. At its surface, it appears to be about a man who feels eclipsed when his best friend announces that he too is going to become a father at the same time. But beneath that, the narrative exposes how deeply entangled the narrator's sense of self has become with the presence of his friend, someone who has consistently mirrored his milestones but with apparent superiority, thanks to financial privilege or timing. Over the years, what may have started as playful rivalry or harmless comparison has evolved into something corrosive. The narrator has internalized a narrative in which he is always one step behind, and this mindset distorts even the most intimate and life-changing experiences, such as becoming a parent. The emotional rupture happens not because the friend is also having a child, but because this new life event, something deeply personal and long anticipated, gets folded into a familiar dynamic of feeling lesser than. His joy is no longer his own, it becomes just another shared checkpoint, and this shatters the uniqueness he hoped to find in the experience. This moment is also telling in how it reveals unprocessed grief over years of comparison, perhaps a friendship that's been subtly competitive rather than mutually supportive. The friend's behavior, while not overtly malicious, comes off as tone-deaf or self-centered, adding to the narrator's feeling of isolation. The narrator's emotional response is complex. He feels guilt for his resentment, shame for not being happy for someone he cares about, and confusion over how something so good could feel so tainted. He retreats into silence and into the safety of his own immediate family, realizing that he's not only grieving the loss of emotional exclusivity, but also questioning the emotional safety of the friendship itself. Ultimately, this story becomes a meditation on how unresolved insecurities can manifest in moments of joy, and how essential it is to confront those feelings, not to condemn oneself, but to protect the authenticity of one's own life journey. It's a reminder that comparison is not just the thief of joy, it can be the thief of meaning if left unchallenged. I spent my 20s raising my husband, and I don't care about fixing our marriage anymore. Essentially what the title says, I met my husband when I was 19 and he was 25, and I spent the last 9 years raising him. My husband is a genuinely good person with a kind heart, everyone loves him. But, his parents babied him and his brother their entire lives, and he still uses the excuse of a relationship that ended over 11 years ago as his reasoning for being incapable of being an equal partner and functional adult. He said most of this relationship was miserable, which shows me he will stay in an unhappy situation to avoid change, which is our situation right now. For a majority of our relationship, I contributed the bulk of the finances, housework, errands, cooking, vet appointments, car maintenance, gifts for family and friends on both sides, etc. Even when I was incredibly sick, I continued this at any time he contributed his fair share, not financially, that has always been me. He was applauded and told he was taking such great care of me. I eventually got better, right before COVID happened, and I could still see a future ahead of us. We truly are best friends, so we actually had a blast during lockdown and used the time to reconnect. Things were still unequal, but they were good nonetheless. Then, he admitted to me that his real bedroom preferences are the opposite of what he led me to believe, rendering us basically sexually incompatible after being together over 5 years at that point. I tried for a while to force it, but sex became another unsatisfying chore for me, another thing I had to give up to cater to him. It stripped me of my femininity, and placed me even further as the only dominant partner in our relationship, in the bedroom and out. This is something I had explicitly said I didn't want from the very beginning, but of course his needs always came before mine, as did everyone else's. There were multiple situations where he showed me with no uncertainty that to him, the opinions and feelings of everyone else always came above mine, even if it was a stranger. If I wanted help, I had to write lists, reminders, and give instructions. If someone else needed or wanted something, suddenly he is capable of anything without being asked twice, further showing me that I was the lowest priority on his list. After a situation where he lied to me for no reason and neglected me during a pivotal moment, I finally pushed him away in my mind. He became a best friend and a roommate. I was determined to figure out how to leave. I moved us back to his hometown, to be close to his friends and family, as he has always insisted that he wouldn't be able to function in life without me. At that point we had lived in a city for 5 years, where he never once made an attempt to make friends or create a social life for himself. He became extremely codependent and I began feeling suffocated. It further infantilized him in my mind. I tried to see if things would get better after the move, but they didn't. I tried talking about all of these issues with him, but he would shut down and sulk like a punished child, and I would end up apologizing and placating him. He continued to let his parents believe I would change my mind about having children, despite me always being honest with them, and me telling him I would never want them on our second date. I was tired of them insisting I would change my mind, so I got sterilized this year as a gift to myself. Since the surgery, his mother has been cold to me and acting like I betrayed her, when I have always been honest about it. We had an amazing relationship before this, and I sort of blame him for lying to her all of these years. Taking care of him financially ruined me, as he was never willing to look for a better job until his parents wanted him to, and our lifestyle is not exactly frugal. I finally got my financial shit together, and was 1 foot out the door when his father died suddenly. I didn't feel like I could leave his family at this time, as they don't do well during a crisis, and my whole life has basically been a non-stop crisis situation, so I am able to be calm and take care of things during those moments. He started making a lot of backhanded and passive-aggressive comments about our lack of a sex life, and I finally snapped. I laid everything out for him, and explained that I've been wanting to leave for 3 years, that I'm tired of being a parent to a grown man, that I tried to fix things, and have given what should have been the most carefree decade of my life to him so he could continue living on easy mode like he has been his entire life. Now suddenly, he is a completely new person and has been love-bombing me, but needs constant reassurance and acknowledgement every time he does something. It doesn't feel genuine, it just feels like a performance to keep me from leaving. He always said he recognized these things in himself and promised he would change, but he never did until I stopped being intimate with him. No matter what I do, I lose. I'm not close with my family, and most of my friends in the city are his lifelong friends, so I lose my support system. I lose my car, my living situation, one of my dogs, a ton of the things I busted my ass to purchase. I grew up extremely poor, so having my creature comforts is important to me. I have to start over in so many ways, and he gets to continue being taken care of, as his family is well off and always supports him. I get to pay off the debt he put me in, and deal with the scrutiny of all of our friends and family, who somehow view me as the fuck up, because I never finished college and have always been the black sheep of the family. I'm scared, I'm exhausted, and I feel this wound has festered too long to be healed. I don't see a future where we have a sex life, a happy and balanced partnership, or where there is not resentment in my heart. I love him, and I want him to start over as the new man he can be, without that person seeing the worst side of him. I don't want him living life feeling that he has something to prove. I just want to be alone, the only time in my life I have felt truly cared for, when I was doing it myself. I just want happiness for both of us, even if it's painful in the short term, but I hate to see him hurting, even if it means I am suffering to keep him comfortable. Sorry this was so long, but I have had to keep all of this inside for so long, I just needed to vent. I still don't know what I'm going to do, but the right answer feels obvious. I just have to take the leap, for both of us. Honestly, sometimes I wish I would have just died when I was sick. It would have been easier than this. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a harrowing, emotionally complex portrait of a woman whose 20s were consumed by emotional labor, financial strain, and the burden of raising a partner who never truly grew up. It is a study in chronic self-sacrifice and the slow erosion of identity that occurs when one partner continuously takes on the role of the caregiver, protector, and provider, while the other remains passive, infantilized, and emotionally unavailable. The narrator's journey is marked by a deeply ingrained pattern of caretaking rooted both in her partner's learned helplessness and her own crisis-hardened resilience. She entered the relationship young, at 19, still forming her adult self, and ended up parenting a man 6 years older who clung to childhood excuses and deflected responsibility for his stagnation. Her partner's reliance on her became total, financially, emotionally, socially, and even sexually, leaving her depleted and resentful. What's especially tragic is the disconnect between perception and reality. Her husband is seen as a good guy by the outside world, praised for the most minimal efforts, while she has carried the invisible weight of keeping everything together. Her experience speaks to how patriarchal conditioning often rewards men for basic functioning while punishing women for having limits. Every act of her independence, whether stating her sexual boundaries, refusing motherhood, or managing finances, is treated as betrayal, not autonomy. The mismatch between his public persona and his private failures further isolates her, leaving her without a support system and emotionally gaslit by the double standard. Even the people closest to them, including his family and mutual friends, have been swayed by a narrative that minimizes her suffering and magnifies his. The story also explores the devastating consequences of emotional neglect. Her desires, voice, and even her femininity were slowly stripped away as she molded herself around his needs. His recent efforts at change, sparked not by understanding or empathy, but seemingly by the threat of losing her, ring hollow, performative rather than transformative. They reveal a desperate man trying to maintain comfort, not a partner ready to confront his own dysfunction. Love bombing, requests for validation, and last-minute heroics fail to undo years of imbalance. For her, healing means escape, even if it requires starting over with nothing. Her reflections show a mature understanding of love. She does not wish him harm and even hopes he grows into someone better, but that growth, she realizes, must happen without her. Ultimately, this story is a deeply painful but empowering realization that sometimes, survival requires leaving behind the person you've loved the most, because staying means continuing to abandon yourself. It is not a tale of cruelty or betrayal, but of quiet endurance, invisible labor, and the moral courage it takes to walk away, not out of hate, but in pursuit of a life where one's existence is no longer a performance of worthiness. I'm a 45-year-old man, still in love with the man I left 2 decades ago. A warning. I'm gonna call the man I can't get over Tyler. It's a fake name, but I want to respect his privacy. It was 2001, I was 21 and at NYU studying to be an urban planner. I'm from Michigan originally and was at New York on scholarship. I had just broken up with my girlfriend a year ago, and had decided that I could be gay. Turns out I'm bi, but being a kid raised religious in the Midwest, I wasn't really sure what that was. But either way I started going, alone, to a couple gay bars. One night, fall semester of my junior year, not too long after September 11th actually, I met Tyler at a bar. I had never seen a man like him before. I guess you could say he was a twink, and he was dressed like one, and had makeup on. We talked and he coaxed me into dancing, and with some liquid courage I kissed him. It was the first time I had ever kissed another man. And I loved it. We made out at the bar and made plans to see each other again soon. We had our first date a few days later. Now I've always been a sort of man's man, I guess you could say, and what was so nice about Tyler is that he knew that right away I could tell, and he played into it. Letting me be the lead in a lot of things, paying for things, cooking him dinner. I did at the time and still do go to the gym, and he would always talk about my muscles. I'm 6 foot and Tyler, although I don't remember his exact height, was quite a bit shorter than me, and would always tell me how he loved how I towered over him. He also made my first time having sex with a man amazing too. In a word, he was into me more than anyone else had been before. And I think maybe after too. That brings me to where things fell apart. By the end of my senior year, I knew I needed to make a decision with us. We had been dating almost 2 years. And my parents still didn't know. He had been telling me I should tell them, but telling them would mean a lot of things, and I didn't want to unless I was going to be with him long term. I think he knew this on some level. Eventually, I decided I couldn't disappoint my whole family. I knew that my mom would be sad, but come around, but my dad would be pissed and my grandparents would probably disown me. I told Tyler that I just didn't think this was right. I'd lost feelings, a lie at the time I didn't know was a lie. I think I had convinced myself of this at the time to make it easier on me, but I still had feelings, and that since I'd be moving for work I didn't want to make him come with me and we should break up. He called my bluff and said that he would move with me. All I had to do was ask, and I had to double down on the other things. I think deep down he knew the real reason why the way he acted when we broke up was way too passive, and not like him at all. I appreciate him doing that if that's the case. We ended on good terms. After a few more times seeing each other to exchange things, and a goodbye dinner we had together right before I moved away, I never saw him again. The breakup was brutal. It took me so long to get over him, but moving and getting a good paying, high work job helped and I put it out of my mind. I dated, but nothing ever felt right. I could never really find the right person and I'd always lose interest. Don't get me wrong, I want to find someone. But I just don't seem to be able. I want to be in love. I want to take care of someone and make them feel special. There just doesn't seem to be anyone right for me, or the ones that aren't into me. I've had longer relationships, a few years, but nothing ever feels right. About a year ago, as I was moving into my new house, first big house I've ever had, personal office and everything, I've always lived below my means until my debts were paid, I picked up some boxes I was keeping at my parents' house. Inside one was an envelope filled with some pictures of me and Tyler. There were only 13 in all, but they were the ones I couldn't bring myself to throw out. Everything else he had given me I tossed eventually. It broke me. Since that day a year ago, there hasn't been a single day that goes by where I don't think about him. I see him in dreams, I cry every night at home. I don't think I ever got over that breakup. I just stopped thinking about it. I never healed. I never stopped loving him. I made the next mistake when I got on Facebook and looked him up back in January. This would be the part in the story where he's single or divorced, but this is the real world. He's married to a man, a big guy like me. LOL, he has a type I guess, and he looks very happy. He went to school for early childhood education and it looks like he's a preschool/kindergarten teacher, still on the East Coast. I will never, ever contact him. I know I broke his heart as well as my own. And I never want to mess up what he has now. He and his husband look so happy. I just wish it was me. But then he wouldn't have this job he seems to love, he would have followed me. Also, it worked out for the best. I'm happy for him. I'm happy I got to have him even for a little bit. I wasn't who he was supposed to be with, but I think he was who I was supposed to be with. No one has ever loved me like he did. No one has ever treated me so, and made me feel so special and safe and loved. No one before and no one since. Those were the best years of my life and might never find them again. I'm in therapy now and it's helping, but I still miss him. So much. So I guess this is a lesson for the youngins out there. If you love someone, don't let anyone, not your parents, not your grandparents, your friends, your family, your coworkers, strangers, no one dictate whether or not you're gonna be with them. You might be giving up so much more than you know. Thanks for listening, guys. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a raw, poignant confession of long-endured regret, heartbreak, and the enduring power of a love lost to fear and societal pressure. It is a deeply emotional reflection from a man in midlife, still haunted by the quiet, devastating consequences of a decision he made 2 decades ago, not out of malice, but out of fear, self-preservation, and cultural conditioning. At its core, the narrative captures a love that bloomed against the odds, only to be suffocated by the weight of internalized shame and familial expectation. The relationship between the narrator and Tyler was not just romantic, it was formative. Tyler was his first real experience of love, affection, sexual authenticity, and emotional intimacy with another man. The warmth and safety Tyler offered, coupled with the narrator's masculine protector role, created a dynamic where both partners felt seen and valued in ways they hadn't before. It was, as the narrator describes, the most deeply cherished love of his life. The tragedy lies not in betrayal, but in surrendering to silence. The narrator's choice to walk away was not due to a lack of love, but because he could not bear to disappoint his family or face the fallout of coming out in a conservative, religious environment. The emotional burden of that decision, while at the time cloaked in denial and rationalization, has never left him. What makes this story especially moving is how he describes the aftermath. He built a life of stability, success, and respectability, yet the emotional fulfillment that once lit up his world was never truly replaced. Relationships came and went, but none touched the emotional and spiritual depth of what he had with Tyler. His longing is not romantic idealization, it's the aching realization that no one else has ever made him feel as safe, desired, and whole. The rediscovery of their photographs acts as a narrative catalyst, forcing him to confront what he never properly mourned, not just the end of a relationship, but the version of himself that never got to fully live, love, and be seen without shame. Seeing Tyler happy and fulfilled without him is bittersweet, not because he wishes him harm, but because it underscores the finality of what's been lost. There is grace in the narrator's acceptance. He does not intend to reach out or disrupt Tyler's life, but his enduring love adds a solemn depth to the narrative. Sometimes love stories don't end because of incompatibility or betrayal, but because fear wins. Ultimately, this story is a warning, yes, but more than that, it is a testament to how deeply our early loves can shape us and how the consequences of denying ourselves the truth can echo across decades. It's a plea to choose authenticity over approval, love over fear, and to recognize that sometimes the real heartbreak is not in being left, but in leaving, and living with the weight of what could have been. Found out who my real dad was over 1 year ago and I'm still angry about it. Hi, my 23F, mother, 61F, hid my father from me my whole life. I never met him at all. I was the youngest of 4 kids, 2 older brothers and 1 older sister. They all knew their dads. My 2 brothers have the same father, then my sister had a different dad, so basically all of us are half-siblings. Only my 2 older brothers are fully related. So, I was given up to my grandma when I was born and my mom got me back at 8 years old. I never knew my dad. You can check my past posts, but my mom and I don't get along. I always asked her who he was because Father's Day was always ignored to me since I never had any father until my best friend's dad basically was my dad. One time when I was 9? 10? She gave me a book about traveling to meet a dad, like a childhood book. So I was so excited, then she never brought it up again. When I was 12 years old she told me his name was her fake name obviously, and so I hunted for a decade. Anywhere on social media mostly. He didn't exist anywhere. Fast forward to winter 2023, early December. My cousin is in prison for fighting on multiple records or something like that. Well, he opened the can of worms cause I cried saying I was pregnant and wished my daughter could have a blood-related grandpa. Which he told me he knew my real dad and my aunts did too. My real dad is named Joe, fake name, and he died in 2014, but I was a result of an affair on his side, plus all my siblings are German and Irish and I'm the only Mexican and German one. Joe tried to see me multiple times but my mom avoided him, tried to abort me, and she made sure he wasn't on the birth certificate. I found out on Joe's side I have 2 half-sisters. When I finally found out I cried harder than ever cause I looked just like him. My half-sisters too. He died in 2014 of cancer. I never got to meet him. I feel robbed. When I asked my mom to be truthful about it on Christmas, she finally confessed after I told her I knew. My whole life I was lied to about my own father and I found out he died. I still feel anger for it, and when I asked why she just says she didn't know. I'll never get reasons for it. My half-sister talked to me as well saying they always knew, but my second oldest brother told them to keep quiet. My other half-sister passed away last year as well. I'm just venting even if this is a year old because I still feel robbed and I feel anger towards for my mother for it. It felt like I chased a ghost for a decade, and the worst part is I look so much like him. I look nothing like my mother, so now I question if she treated me badly because of it. Thanks for reading. Edit, fixed the affair mistake. My dad cheated on his wife at the time with my mom. Heck if it was long going or a one-time thing, and I don't know why everyone blocked him from seeing me or knowing about his existence. My family is known to hide things to make my mom look good. They also said it'd just hurt me more, but from what I know about Joe was that he was married, had 2 girls, had a drinking problem at one point, got lung cancer in 2014 and passed the same year. Also, I didn't have social media until I was 13. I tried at 12 looking for my dad on my older sister's account, but again, no results. My mom was leading me to dead ends on purpose. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a slow-burning heartbreak, a portrait of identity obscured by family secrets, of a daughter forced to hunt for pieces of herself through lies, silence, and the shadows of a man she never got to meet. It is a story of betrayal, not in the loud explosive sense, but in the quiet, lingering way that seeps into every corner of one's life and reshapes their understanding of who they are and where they come from. At its core, the narrator's grief is not just about the loss of her father, it's about being denied him. It's about being deliberately misled for over a decade, sent chasing a ghost with a fake name, offered symbolic breadcrumbs like a children's book about a journey to meet a dad, only for those leads to go nowhere. This wasn't an accidental omission, it was a sustained erasure of truth. And it came not from strangers, but from the people who were supposed to protect her. Her anger, still sharp a year later, is not excessive, it's righteous. Because her pain was preventable. The loss of a parent always leaves a scar, but the wound is deeper when that loss is laced with the knowledge that someone else made the choice for you. Her mother's decision to hide Joe's identity wasn't just a denial of a name, it was a denial of roots, connection, heritage, and the chance for a relationship. The mother's motives remain murky, and perhaps forever unknowable. Whether they were rooted in shame, fear, control, or self-preservation, they resulted in a profound injustice, one that the narrator is now left to carry alone. The tragedy is layered. Her father, Joe, wanted to be in her life. He tried. He was kept away. He died without her ever knowing him. And when she finally pieces together the truth, it comes not through the honest confessions of family, but through a relative in prison, further underlining just how dysfunctional and dishonest her environment has been. Even then, she doesn't get the full story. Only fragments, some from a half-sister, some from whispers, and most hidden behind a veil of "it would hurt you more." But that lie only served the comfort of the adults, not the emotional safety of the child. The narrator's description of being the only one of Mexican descent among her siblings, of never having her own Father's Day, of questioning whether her mother's coldness stemmed from her resemblance to Joe, these are subtle, cutting ways that isolation shaped her development. She was not just left out, she was othered in her own family. There's an implication of scapegoating, of being treated as a living reminder of something shameful or painful, even though none of it was her fault. What makes this narrative even more devastating is the timing. Her discovery coincides with her own pregnancy, a moment when she is on the cusp of parenthood herself, craving answers and groundedness. She yearns not only for her father, but for something ancestral and secure to pass on. Instead, she finds absence. Her grief is not just for what she lost, but for what her child will never know. And yet, there is resilience in her voice. She's angry. She's hurt. But she's seeking truth, naming injustice, and breaking the silence that shaped her life. That's powerful. Her story becomes a reckoning not just with her family's past, but with the future she wants to build, one where secrets do not rot under the surface and where truth, even when painful, is offered as a form of love. This story is a reminder that silence, when used to shield others from the truth, often causes far more harm than honesty ever could. It shows how lies of omission can create generational fractures, how the denial of one's origins becomes a lifelong wound, and how the search for belonging, when stifled by secrecy, can turn into a form of emotional exile. Her pain is real. Her anger is justified. And her determination to voice it is the first step in reclaiming a story that was never hers to begin with, but is now, finally, being written in her own words. My child's grandparents are fighting me for custody. I was 17 when I gave birth to my daughter. I got pregnant by my then-boyfriend, who wanted nothing to do with being a dad. For half the pregnancy, I was planning on adoption and had already started the process with an agency. I hadn't picked a family yet, but I was actively looking. He told me to pick whoever I wanted, he trusted me but didn't want to be involved. My family supported the idea. I brought it up first, and they agreed it was the best path for my future. It's not that they didn't care about the baby, but my mom made it clear that I was their main concern. My boyfriend was supportive, but mostly because it meant he could avoid responsibility. When I was around 6.5 months pregnant, I caught him with another girl. I was heartbroken and realized I'd been making all these huge life decisions for him. I knew it was stupid to have unprotected sex, but I did because he convinced me. I kept the pregnancy because I loved him. I chose adoption because he didn't want a baby. But deep down, I didn't feel at peace with it, I was depressed and sick about it. Eventually, I admitted to myself that I wanted to keep my baby, not for him, but for me. That decision felt like a huge relief. Telling my parents was terrifying. They tried to talk me out of it, but eventually, especially with my dad's support, they got behind me. We made a plan for me to keep my baby and finish school. When I gave birth, my ex and his parents came to the hospital, but they didn't stay long. His parents literally wrote my parents a check and said their son had too much going for him to be tied down just because I changed my mind and wanted to play mommy. Then, nothing. For over a year, they never reached out, never asked about my daughter. Meanwhile, my family rearranged their entire lives to support us. They paid for everything, took care of her when I was in school, made sure I kept my grades up, stayed in sports and activities, they really helped me succeed while being a mom. One day, I randomly ran into his parents while I was out with my daughter. I expected them to ignore us, but they were all smiles, saying how cute she was and how much she looked like their son. I personally think she looks just like me, but whatever. A few days later, my ex texted me saying he wanted to see her. I was surprised but happy. I still had feelings for him and wanted him to want to be a dad. I brought her to his parents' house and stayed the whole time. They acted really sweet and seemed like they regretted how they had treated us. His mom told me she was just scared for her son and hoped I understood. My ex seemed awkward but did try to play with the baby a little. Over time, his parents offered to babysit occasionally. They said it wasn't fair for my family to do all the work and that they wanted to help. When I started college, I figured the extra support would be helpful. I still lived at home, had full custody, and was doing everything I could to balance being a mom and a student. But slowly, things changed. They started calling themselves co-parents, making comments like, "We know what's best," or "You're still just a kid." They'd refer to her as our baby in front of me and my parents. I brushed it off at first, trying not to start conflict. Then they tried setting the visitation schedule and coming up with excuses to keep her long, taking her on outings without my permission or knowledge so they wouldn't even be home when I went by to pick her up. Then came the criticism. They'd say her clothes were too small or not right for the weather even though they were totally fine. One time I didn't pack enough diapers for a short visit and they made a huge deal about it, calling me irresponsible. They'd complain I didn't send enough food, even though she was only there for a few hours. I started to feel like they were looking for things to use against me. And then came the bombshell: they hired a lawyer and filed for custody. Not visitation, full-on primary custody. They claim I'm too young and immature to be a fit parent. They argue their son is being cut out even though he hasn't made any effort legally or otherwise. They're using the fact that I let them be involved as proof that I'm dependent on them, and they're trying to present themselves as de facto parents. They even say that my parents are too involved and that my daughter is being raised by a committee instead of in a proper household. I'm still in school, working part-time, and living at home. But I'm her mom. I've been her only consistent parent. My parents help because that's what good families do, that's not neglect. It's terrifying to think that people with more money and influence could take her away just because I was a teen mom. I've hired a family law attorney, my parents are paying for it and helping me navigate everything, and we're fighting back. I have texts, messages, and people who can back me up. I've never been anything but her mother from day one. I never expected this. I let them in. I wanted my daughter to know her dad's side of the family. I thought we were coexisting peacefully. I don't understand why they would try to do this to me. I feel like I'm being punished for trying to give them a chance. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a gripping, heartbreaking example of how generosity, vulnerability, and good faith can be weaponized, especially against young mothers. It is a cautionary tale about the power dynamics embedded in age, class, and perception and how quickly they can shift from supportive to predatory. At the emotional core of this story is a young woman who made a life-altering decision at a fragile age, to keep her baby despite overwhelming pressure to give her up. That decision required bravery, maturity, and emotional clarity, qualities that directly contradict the accusations now being made against her. Her choice wasn't rash or naive, it was deeply considered, built not on fantasy, but on love. And it's clear she has lived up to the responsibilities of motherhood, surrounded by a strong, supportive family system. The betrayal in this story is slow, deliberate, and insidious. The grandparents' initial abandonment, signified most grotesquely by writing a check to absolve their son of responsibility, is damning in itself. For a year, they were absent. And yet, their sudden re-entry wasn't motivated by remorse or reconnection, but rather a strategy: gain access, build trust, establish a pattern of involvement, and then seize control. Their legal maneuver isn't just a violation of trust, it's an attempt to rewrite history. They are trying to erase the narrative of absence and paint themselves as the saviors of a neglected child. By framing the narrator's young age and support network as evidence of unfitness, they weaponize her very efforts to be a good mom. They distort her support system into a liability, not a strength. This is gaslighting at an institutional level, supported by privilege and a presumption that wealth and stability trump love and lived responsibility. But what's perhaps most devastating is how the narrator's kindness and willingness to share her daughter, qualities rooted in maturity and empathy, are the very things being turned against her. She didn't keep her daughter hidden out of spite. She welcomed these people into her child's life, even after being burned by them once. And now she's being punished for believing that shared love wouldn't lead to a custody war. The grandparents' behavior reflects a toxic entitlement, often seen in cases where a young mother is perceived as lacking power or legitimacy. They believe that because they are older, wealthier, and connected to the child biologically, they should have ultimate control. But biology is not parenting. Biology did not show up in the middle of the night. Biology did not pay the bills, change the diapers, stay up late after school to study, or feel the loneliness and strength it takes to mother as a teenager. This case also highlights a dangerous societal bias, that young motherhood is inherently irresponsible, and that support from family disqualifies someone from being the real parent. This is a myth. Community-based parenting is not incompetence, it's resilience. Despite the betrayal and trauma, the narrator's voice remains clear, composed, and grounded in truth. She is not asking for pity. She is stating her reality and fighting for her daughter. She shows more stability and emotional intelligence than the very people questioning her ability. Her fear is valid. The legal system has a history of favoring those with money, age, and perceived normalcy. But her preparation, the texts, witnesses, and a legal team show she is not backing down. That, in itself, is proof of her fitness as a parent. This story is a warning about how privilege can mask predation, about how systems sometimes fail those who need protection most, and about how, in the face of all of that, love still endures. This young woman is not just a teen mom. She is a mother in the fullest sense of the word, protective, devoted, and fierce. And no one has the right to take that from her. Got kicked out a year ago and I'm still not over it. I'm sitting here 3:30 a.m. have to work tomorrow morning and it randomly popped up in my head and I can't sleep. Every time this happens I get so angry and sad and I hate that I can't let this go. Mostly because it blows my mind it even happened at all. Sorry this is a novel but it's a lot to explain. Basically 2 days after my 27th birthday, the day of Halloween in 2023 me and my best friend, 28 at the time, decided to move across country together. I know everyone always says do not do this and I know now trust me. I thought it would be okay that we were friends for over a decade at that point. This girl literally felt like a sister to me. I was really hesitant at first for all the reasons that ended up happening, ironically, also not having a job lined up, but ended up biting the bullet and doing it. Felt like if I could trust anyone it would be her. We made all sorts of plans on stuff we would do when we moved and I was feeling excited. She got an offer for her dream job in Oklahoma. Yes, Oklahoma, so not even a place that was ever on my radar. But my own family moved out of the state I was living in. The state I was living in was not much better and I didn't have a good job keeping me there either. I thought maybe a fresh start would be good. We thought it would be good for both of us. Turns out it was only good for one of us. Not even a month after we move and she gets a boyfriend, it's a guy she works with. She decides she doesn't want us to get anything for our apartment because our lease was only 6 months and we were gonna move in with him. Her boyfriend was extremely wealthy, his father a billionaire. He lived in a penthouse. I was working a pretty low-income job, one that I scrambled to find when we got there, so I can't afford to get any furniture by myself. I also got rid of everything just to move out there. I had been sleeping on an air mattress. So things really weren't great from the get-go. Things with them were moving super fast. The guy pretty much lived at our apartment and they had already talked about getting married. Keep in mind our 6-month lease wasn't even close to over yet. I liked the guy, he seemed nice enough and we all got along. However, I was starting to feel pretty depressed because the best friend I moved across country with slowly stopped talking to me. We were just roommates. I felt like I was just used to bring her there, she couldn't drive, and ditched me not only months later in this random state where I knew no one yet. My closest family lived 18 hours away one direction and my friends lived 18 hours away another direction. I started to feel pretty isolated and depressed. Now at this point we had been living here for 4 months, we had 2 months left on our lease. My friend decided we should move in her boyfriend's penthouse now and we wouldn't have to pay rent and it would be so much nicer than where we currently were living. We didn't even have a chair in this place. In hindsight I should have said no, I was in a strange situation and she was the only anchor I had in this place. I thought well it couldn't be that bad, he was nice, maybe too nice. I had my doubts but ended up doing it anyways. Not to mention saving money on rent was honestly a pretty big factor. I had talked to him personally to make sure it was okay and he was 100% down so we moved in. It got bad fast. I mean faster than I thought it could tbh. Her and I had an argument one week, pretty much that ever since we moved she had distanced herself almost completely from me. I was living with this couple where I now felt like a stranger and the dynamics just made me feel more depressed. We used to talk constantly. She would blow me up if I didn't reach out to her etc., so it was definitely a strong fade and I didn't really understand why. Instead of talking it out with me she had her boyfriend do it. Him and her pretty much laid into me the one night when I got home from work and said I needed to go out and make my own friends and that Emily, name change for anonymity, the friend I moved with, would have been thriving and I needed to be more like her. Pretty much belittled me while Emily would agree, and then we made up and dropped it at that. At that point I knew I needed to get out of there. The entire situation and state was ruining my mental health, and I called up my parents and made arrangements to come live and move down to where they were. Keep in mind I haven't even been there for 6 months yet. This was about a little over a month in of me living in this penthouse. I ended up taking her boyfriend's advice. I invited this girl over that I worked with and we hung out on a Saturday night on the balcony of the apartment. I was told I was allowed to invite people over and this was the first time I ever did so. At this point I was already going to be moving out in a week and they both already knew that. That night me and my coworker, the friend I had invited over, we were drinking on the balcony. I get home from work the next day to her boyfriend telling me my friend left a bowl outside. I had no idea. I don't smoke weed, it gives me too much anxiety. I apologized and was honestly confused. For some reason I thought he meant an ashtray because I don't remember her smoking or even it being out there, let alone me smoke it. That alone gave them fuel to kick me then and there that day. Emily let her boyfriend handle the situation again and he yelled at me for hours over it, belittled me, and told me he never wanted to see my face again. That I was stupid and that I'm lying. I asked for at least a week since they knew I had nowhere to go minus leaving the actual state itself, and it was a no. Told them it would never happen again and he laughed and said it wouldn't because I'm leaving now. Attacked my character and everything because I worked a restaurant job and insinuated that I was a lowly alcoholic who probably spent all my money on drugs and alcohol and didn't have my shit together and that's why I couldn't have the week to move. That I was, it turns out he had gone through my room that day and multiple times before that. The hard rule when I moved in was no drugs because they both worked government jobs and it could mean drug testing if something like that was reported. Which I understand fully, but I never meant for any of that to happen. I don't even do drugs, lol. I was already trying to leave. I knew it was not a good place to be in and that day proved my best friend of 10 years was no friend at all. I packed up my car that night and drove across country at midnight and drove until I couldn't drive anymore. And today? I'm so glad I'm out of there, but I still can't get over all the hurt. I packed up my life for a friend who would no sooner throw me out for a guy because he was rich. And no, I haven't spoken to them since. They both texted me at 7 a.m. the next morning because they peeked in my room to see if I was still there. Gave me shit for forgetting to leave the key and leaving my mattress and that I blocked them. Give someone less than 24 hours to move across country, it was the best I could do. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a deeply painful and layered account of betrayal, emotional abandonment, class-based humiliation, and the collapse of a long-standing friendship. At its core, it is not just about a failed move or a toxic living situation, it's about the shock of realizing that someone you trusted like family could treat you as disposable the moment their circumstances changed. The protagonist entered this cross-country move in good faith, giving up her belongings, stability, and sense of home for a fresh start with someone she loved and trusted. But as soon as her friend found romantic and financial security through a wealthy partner, she rapidly shifted loyalties, emotionally withdrawing and slowly erasing the protagonist from the life they had just built together. This story captures the anguish of watching someone morph in front of your eyes, no longer seeing you as a partner in life but as a burden or inconvenience. The friend not only allowed her boyfriend to dominate their shared space but also delegated emotional confrontations to him, stripping the friendship of intimacy, respect, and communication. What's worse is the power imbalance. While the friend and her partner lived in a penthouse backed by generational wealth and high-status careers, the protagonist worked a modest restaurant job, slept on an air mattress, and had no nearby support system. This vulnerability was weaponized against her, with the boyfriend belittling her, falsely accusing her, invading her privacy, and ultimately kicking her out with no regard for her safety or mental health. The bowl incident became a convenient scapegoat for what was really a buildup of classist resentment, emotional detachment, and perhaps even guilt. Instead of compassion or maturity, she was met with cruelty, thrown out with less than 24 hours notice and no empathy for the trauma she'd already endured. This betrayal cuts so deeply not just because of the circumstances, but because it violates a decade-long friendship, built on shared trust and intimacy, that was discarded for status and convenience. The emotional residue of this kind of betrayal doesn't fade quickly, it lingers, resurfacing in sleepless nights, unwanted memories, and unanswered questions about your own worth. It's not just grief for what happened, but grief for the version of her friend she thought she knew, and for the part of herself that believed she was truly loved back. I don't know how I'm still here. I really don't. I'm so tired. Not the I need sleep kind. It's the kind of tired that sits in your bones. The kind that makes it hard to breathe. The kind where you wake up and feel like you've already run a marathon, but all you did was open your eyes. Since my dad died, I haven't had a single second to catch my breath. His death wasn't peaceful. It wasn't quiet. It was traumatic in a way I still can't bring myself to describe, and it shattered something in me. I can't explain the weight of watching someone you love go like that. And I feel like the universe hasn't stopped kicking me since. Every time I try to stand, another blow comes. Another wave. Another loss. It just doesn't fucking stop. Recently, someone else I cared about deeply died. Kuz. My darts partner. My friend. One of the few people in my life who made me feel like I could actually be myself without judgment. He was always so full of joy, always smiling, like the kind of man who carried light with him wherever he went. Darts was hard for me. I doubted myself a lot. But Kuz? He made it fun again. Winning didn't matter to him. He made me feel like I mattered. Before every match, he'd smile and say, "Are you ready, partner?" And for those moments, I believed in myself. I believed in us. I felt safe. Now he's gone, and it feels like I've lost my dad all over again. He and his brother JK were inseparable, one of those rare sibling bonds that you can't even describe without getting emotional. Kuz was the gentle one. Patient. Kind. The kind of person who makes you feel seen without ever having to say a word. JK tries to push me out of my shell, not in a bad way, just different, but Kuz? Kuz held space for me. Quietly. Softly. And now I sit across from JK, watching him grieve his other half, and I don't know what to do. I want to help him. I want to be strong for him. But how do you comfort someone when you're bleeding too? Last night, we sat together, me, JK, and someone else, and they started talking about loss. About pain. I wanted so badly to speak. To say something. Anything. I had this massive lump in my throat, like barbed wire, like it would tear me open if I tried. And when I finally did try, they just spoke over me. Like I wasn't there. Like I didn't exist. That moment broke something in me. Because I realized it's always like that. I've never really been able to talk. To vent. To just be honest about how deeply I'm struggling. Every time I try, people interrupt. Dismiss. Change the subject. I feel like I'm screaming underwater and no one even looks up. I don't know how to keep carrying this alone. I'm falling apart, piece by piece. My body hurts. My mind won't slow down. My heart feels like it's rotting from the inside. And I'm so scared, because I don't know how close I am to giving up. I don't want to die. I want to live. I want to feel the sun again without this weight. But it feels like the only time I'm allowed to feel anything is when I'm alone, in the dark, crying into a pillow so no one hears me. I just want someone, anyone, to hold my pain with me for a minute. To not try to fix it. Not silence it. Just say, "I hear you. I see you. You matter." Because right now, I don't feel like I matter to anyone. And that hurts more than I can say. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a deeply emotional, unfiltered portrait of someone grappling with immense, compounding grief, emotional neglect, and a profound sense of isolation that has eroded their will to keep going. At its core, it is not just a narrative of loss, but of being left behind emotionally, of living through tragedy after tragedy with no room to process, no space to rest, and no one willing to sit in the darkness beside them. The death of the narrator's father is the first major rupture, not just in their life but in their psyche. It was a traumatic, violent loss, not the kind of quiet passing that some people prepare for, but the kind that shatters your nervous system, that changes how you breathe, how you sleep, how you exist. They describe a sense of exhaustion that is not physical, but existential, a tiredness woven into the fabric of their being, a kind of chronic despair that persists no matter how much rest they get. This is the kind of fatigue that comes from holding in years of unspoken anguish, from wearing a mask for too long, from shouldering the weight of grief without the relief of being seen, heard, or validated. The recent death of Kuz, their darts partner and friend, peels open the still bleeding wound. Kuz wasn't just a friend, he was one of the rare people who gave the narrator permission to be themselves, who met them with joy, lightness, patience, and a quiet acceptance that made life feel a little more livable. He didn't just make darts fun, he made the narrator feel worthy, safe, and human in a world that often made them feel like a burden. Losing him was more than losing a teammate, it was like losing a safe place, a mirror of comfort and recognition. It compounded their previous trauma, creating an unbearable emotional echo that reminded them how alone they really are. Even the people who are still around, like Kuz's brother JK, aren't quite able to hold the space the narrator so desperately needs. There's a tragic irony in watching someone else grieve when you're grieving too, and feeling like you have to be the strong one even as your own soul is collapsing. It brings out the central agony of this story. How do you comfort others when you are barely keeping your own head above water? The most devastating element, though, is the persistent invisibility the narrator feels. The moment at the end, when they try to speak about their pain and are talked over, ignored, is not just a minor social discomfort. It's a culmination of years of emotional neglect and invalidation. It's a metaphor for their entire internal experience. The world keeps moving, keeps talking, keeps ignoring, while they are drowning. And when they finally try to cry out, their voice doesn't even register. This moment becomes the breaking point, not because it's the worst thing that ever happened, but because it affirms the unrelenting truth they've come to believe, that their pain doesn't matter, that they don't matter. They're not asking to be saved, or even fixed, they're asking for someone to sit with them, to simply see them, to acknowledge the weight they're carrying without rushing in to cover it up or explain it away. The fact that this simple human need has gone unmet for so long is what makes this narrative so deeply tragic. What elevates this story beyond a typical account of grief is the clarity and intensity with which the narrator expresses their internal state. They articulate the kind of sorrow that lives not on the surface, but deep inside the body, the kind that makes existing feel like a constant struggle. They are not numb, they are too full of feeling, but those feelings have nowhere to go. The story does not shy away from the uncomfortable truth that sometimes, the desire to live is not enough when you feel chronically unseen and unheard. The narrator doesn't want to die, they want to feel alive. They want to feel sunlight without the weight, to cry without shame, to speak without being silenced. And more than anything, they want proof that they still matter, to someone, to anyone. This cry for recognition, for presence, for emotional witness, is as human as it gets. It's a reminder of how vital it is to listen, to notice, to care, and how catastrophic it can be when that care is withheld. My dad told me if I kept eating I'd never lose weight, then kick me out. I, 24F, recently moved back to my parents' house across country while my fiancé, 25M, is making the transit to a new naval station in Hawaii. My parents were very physically and verbally abusive growing up, which led me to having PTSD and severe panic disorder, but through therapy, I thought our relationship had grown. My fiancé has been nothing but kind to me and woke me up to how bad life was at my parents' house through his kindness and empathy. I gained about 8 pounds when I took steroids for bronchitis. I was in the 120s most my adult life, but am currently 133 at 5 feet 4 inches. So on the higher end of a healthy BMI. Regardless, I felt really insecure about my weight, and have struggled with disordered eating in the past, which I'm very open about. My dad has made snide comments about my body. We're very open, so I discussed my insecurities and struggles. Instead of saying I'm beautiful as I am, or even having a neutral response, he told me my ideal weight is 123, that athletic bodies look nicer than my curvy, hourglass body, and that if I feel hungry at night I should just go to sleep. I've been doing moderate to intense cardio daily for at least 30 minutes a day, plus strength training 3-4x a week and stretching, along with switching up my diet completely from eating fast food to eating my Japanese mom's dishes. I have put in the work, but I still haven't dropped much weight, though my body looks visibly toner, clothes are fitting better, and I'm definitely stronger. My parents and I were eating dinner. My mom made some fries and encouraged my dad to eat. He asked where the leftover mashed potatoes were and I apologized and said I ate them last night. Keep in mind, I only eat 2 meals a day, no snacks, so the mashed potatoes along with the turkey sandwich I ate would have been my third meal. He replied, if you keep eating you're never going to lose weight. I could feel myself holding back tears and my mom immediately asked if I was okay. I expressed that I was really hurt. He couldn't understand why and called me too sensitive, and I said he was a bully. What proceeded was a screaming match where he got 2 inches away from my face, yelling at the top of his lungs. I pushed him back but he kept getting in my face as I cried. I told him he was mean, and that my psychologist had once told me if I could just get the hell out of this toxic house, that I would be so much better with my anxiety, which was true. I went from an agoraphobic who couldn't leave my bedroom to someone who can volunteer at a free clinic and go shopping alone after moving across country with my then boyfriend. He said that my favorite word of the day was toxic and if the house was so terrible I best find another place to stay. I yelled fine, as my mom cried and begged me not to leave. She had been very physically abusive growing up but had atoned for a lot, taken accountability, and genuinely grew. I packed up a suitcase and left. I stayed at a hotel last night and called my future Mael, who called my dad's behavior unacceptable and opened her door to me. My mom brought me home to eat breakfast together before my dad woke up. I'm at a loss as to what to do. My mom hardly slept last night, I could tell she was so worried. She stood up for me during the argument, saying that I was doing all the right things to lose weight and the meal she made the night before was too light to stay full from, soba with eggs and cucumber, usually a lunchtime meal in Japan. That of course it hurt that he said that. I don't want to hurt my mom, but staying in this house probably reinforces to my dad that he can just treat me this way no matter what and I'll always come back. My dad has moments of good. For example, he paid for my life when I couldn't leave the house, though held it over my head, gave me his bed when I moved back, I offered over and over to switch, and has helped me in many ways. My heart hurts as I'm completely torn. Does being kind other times justify truly heinous behavior? I have no idea what to do. Edit, my dad woke up and I asked if there was anything he wanted to say. He immediately yelled at me and told me I misunderstood him and that I just want yes men around me to tell me I'm skinny and pretty. I am currently packing to go to my in-laws. Thank you all so much for your advice. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a powerful and heartbreaking account of a young woman trying to reclaim her peace, autonomy, and mental health after a lifetime of emotional, verbal, and physical abuse at the hands of her parents, especially her father. It captures the core struggle of many trauma survivors, the war between longing for familial love and the necessity of self-preservation. The narrator, 24 years old, has already endured an upbringing scarred by abuse that left her with PTSD and severe panic disorder. After years of hard therapeutic work and self-discovery, including a loving and affirming relationship with her fiancé, she begins to see just how abnormal and damaging her parents' behavior truly was. Yet, despite her progress, returning to her parents' home temporarily while in transition becomes a triggering and regressive experience that culminates in an emotionally violent confrontation. This story is a stark reminder that healing is not a straight line, and that revisiting toxic environments even after substantial growth can reopen deep, still healing wounds. The story opens with the narrator contextualizing her recent weight gain, only 8 pounds, caused by necessary medical treatment, and explaining how deeply that shift has impacted her self-esteem, particularly given her past with disordered eating. Her openness about her struggle is met not with empathy or compassion, but with cold, body-shaming remarks from her father. This is not just about weight. This is about control, conditional love, and a refusal to see his daughter as a human being deserving of kindness. Despite all the effort she's put into improving her health physically and emotionally, her father reduces her down to a number on a scale. His comments are not casual observations, they are sharp instruments of psychological harm, weaponized against a person he knows is vulnerable. When she finally pushes back, naming the abuse and asserting that he is a bully, his response is explosive and cruel. Getting inches from her face and screaming, he mirrors the terror of her childhood, reasserting his dominance and punishing her for daring to speak the truth. Her mother, while historically abusive, is portrayed with nuance. She has, by the narrator's account, taken accountability and demonstrated growth. In this situation, she defends her daughter, comforts her, and even sneaks her back into the house for a quiet breakfast, clearly torn between her loyalty to her husband and her love for her child. The mother's efforts feel sincere, but they're not enough to counteract the harm inflicted by the father. The narrator's pain is compounded by guilt for hurting her mother, for causing a rift in the family, and for wanting to leave in order to preserve her mental health. That guilt, however, is tragically misplaced. The real injustice lies not in her decision to walk away, but in the fact that she had to. One of the most searing parts of this narrative is the father's refusal to take responsibility, even when directly confronted. When asked if he has anything to say, instead of acknowledging the hurt, he doubles down, accusing his daughter of simply wanting to be flattered and calling her weak for not tolerating his truth. This kind of gaslighting is textbook emotional abuse: deny, deflect, demean. It's not just cruel, it's a strategy to maintain control and ensure that the abused person questions their own reality. Fortunately, the narrator doesn't fall for it. She sees through the manipulation and begins to pack, this time heading to her future in-laws, whose support contrasts sharply with her father's contempt. That decision is a quiet act of bravery, a reclaiming of agency. This story raises profound questions about the nature of familial love, forgiveness, and boundaries. The narrator is caught in a painful contradiction. Her father has done kind things for her, paid for her life when she was incapacitated, given her a bed, but those gestures are tainted by strings of control and cruelty. She asks the essential question: does kindness in one moment excuse abuse in another? The answer is no. True kindness is not transactional or manipulative. It does not require silence in return. The narrator's internal conflict, her hurt, guilt, confusion, is deeply human, but the clarity of her final action shows growth, wisdom, and the will to protect herself, even when it hurts. Ultimately, this is not just a story of conflict with a parent. It's a story of a woman standing up for herself in the face of lifelong conditioning to stay small, stay quiet, and stay compliant. It's a story about the pain of outgrowing people you once needed, and about finding the strength to choose peace over proximity, healing over habit. It's about breaking generational cycles of abuse and learning that love should never come at the cost of your dignity. And though the narrator is still in the thick of this journey, the decision to leave is a declaration: I matter. I deserve better. I will not keep bleeding just to make you comfortable. I screwed over my cheating husband. Throwaway account for some privacy. My main account has too much about my life and I don't want random people to know my main account and just get too invested on my life, lol. My ex-husband cheating on me with everyone. Literally everyone. It started with our neighbor, yeah, awkward as hell. He cheated on me with his co-worker. He cheated on me with women from social media. Women from bars and clubs. I only knew from checking his phone. He is a good liar. If I didn't check his phone I wouldn't have known any of this. I did confront him. He did apologize, but he said he's a man and he's wired to look at other women and it's in his nature to cheat. He wants me to be his wife because he loves me, but he needs more than one woman sexually. I always knew that his mindset was BS. But I needed my ex-husband, so I said okay, just don't throw it in my face. I don't want to see it, I don't want to know about it, and I don't want your girlfriends coming up to me. I don't want you to mess with anyone that I know, like friends and family. I know staying and planning an escape out is not what people on Reddit recommend. I never posted about my marriage ever until now because I know everyone here would just tell me to pack a suitcase and leave, but that's easier said than done. I'm not trying to be homeless or in a situation that would hurt me more. I'm thinking of shelter and being secure financially. I have kids. I had small children. I wasn't going to risk seeing them only half of the time. I don't have enough money of my own to make it myself, and child support isn't enough, especially back then when my ex-husband didn't make that much money. I would just have been screwed over if we had divorced right then and there, especially during that time we weren't even married that long and we were stuck in an apartment lease, so we didn't even have any property. And trust me, I did talk to an attorney and I would have to share custody with husband, which I couldn't do, and I would be screwed financially. I've never been a forgiving person. I'm a resentful woman. I will screw you over worse than you did me. It might be slower, but it will sting worse than what you did to me. I hate you and I hope you do see this post. You're always on this sub. That's how I knew about it. He would always read me people's confessions on here, and now you have one written about you. What a terrible man you are. I stayed with my ex-husband for 12 years. I left him when I was ready. During the marriage, my ex-husband paid for my schooling to be an esthetician. I went to college for a useless degree and it didn't help me at all in life, so I used my ex-husband to pay for esthetician training. I'm a medical esthetician now and I am financially stable without my ex-husband. During my marriage I did work. I wasn't a som, but I was never advancing in my job. During the marriage, he also paid off my medical debt and student loan debt. We also eventually had a house. We split it and sold it in the divorce. I'm so glad I waited to leave him. I also will eventually receive Social Security and a portion of his 401k. I was able to receive half of the Marshall funds, which is mostly his income. He does have to pay alimony due to our income disparity and length of marriage. It's not long-term alimony. My children are older now. My eldest moved out and I just have one more child about to graduate high school. I just turned 40 this year. It's been a year since my divorce was finalized. My friends and me, if they think I wasted my life, and I can honestly say no. They probably think I wasted my youth being married and having kids, but I will never regret my kids, and even if I had divorced him early on I would still have to struggle with being a single mom, which would have been harder. Instead I got up on my feet, I focused on my career. I had things to do. I was more motivated after he cheated on me. I still lived my life even though I was married to an idiot. I had my causal sex here and there too, he never knew about it. It would have crushed him and he would have filed for forgiven if he found out I cheated on him, but he was not smart and never checked my phone, and I took precautions. Anyways, I got more from waiting to divorce him when I was ready than what I would have gotten if I just left with no plan. I'm in a better position, mentally and financially. He also paid for my therapy. I would have been able to do that on my own. I started dating again after my divorce. I found love again. He knows I just got out of a marriage and it's getting serious between us, but I expressed I don't want to get married again and have a possibility of going through this entire thing again. This was a battle. Losing 100% access to your own children is scary, and I know they are adults now. But then going through this again now that I'm established, I can't lose what I recently gained. I hope my boyfriend can get over the fact that I don't have any interest of getting remarried again, but I'm happy with a long-term relationship with no cohabitation. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a razor-sharp, emotionally raw, and deeply calculated testimony of a woman who refused to be destroyed by betrayal, choosing instead to weaponize her pain into long-term strategy, financial security, and eventual liberation. At its core, this is not just a story of infidelity, it's a chronicle of survival, transformation, and retribution. The narrator, a 40-year-old woman who spent over a decade married to a compulsively unfaithful man, lays bare the toxic foundation of her marriage, a husband who repeatedly cheated on her with neighbors, co-workers, strangers, and online women, justifying it all with the misogynistic belief that men are wired to cheat. Rather than romanticizing or pitying herself, the narrator speaks with biting clarity and unapologetic self-possession, showing us the power of cold patience and careful planning. What makes this story so compelling is that it flips the typical arc of a cheated-on spouse. Instead of leaving immediately, she does something far more controversial and, frankly, tactical. She stays. Not out of weakness, but out of necessity and foresight. She names what so many people gloss over: leaving isn't always safe or realistic, especially for mothers with young children, minimal personal income, and a housing lease that can trap them in place. Reddit is often full of righteous advice to just walk out, but she offers the painful reality that not every woman can do that and survive. In choosing to wait, she doesn't become passive, she becomes a chess master. She lets him fund her career transition, her debt payments, her therapy. She turns the marriage into a stepping stone, a launchpad for her autonomy. And when she does leave, it's on her terms, with a career in place, financial assets secured, children mostly grown, and her dignity intact. Her narration is laced with controlled fury. There is no plea for sympathy, no confusion about her husband's character. She calls him terrible, directly addresses him through the post, and even taunts him with the possibility of reading it. Yet beneath the rage is a chilling elegance. She did not retaliate impulsively. She endured years of humiliation, swallowed resentment, and instead of self-destructing, she built herself up quietly. The same traits her husband underestimated, her silence, her compliance, her seeming tolerance, became her weapons. By the time she left, she had turned his income, his assets, and even his own obliviousness into the foundation of her independence. Her confession about her own secret affairs adds another layer of complexity. She doesn't present herself as morally superior, only strategic. She knew her husband's ego couldn't tolerate the same betrayal he inflicted, so she moved in silence, cheating in return but ensuring he never found out. While this may challenge traditional moral frameworks, it underscores a raw truth: she reclaimed power in a system rigged against her. Where he used dishonesty to dominate, she used discretion to survive. Her retaliation wasn't designed to match his invisibility, it was about emotional symmetry. He would never know the extent to which he had been deceived by the very woman he believed he had dominion over. What's perhaps most powerful is how she reflects on her life with no regret. She doesn't mourn her youth or lament the marriage that consumed 12 years. Instead, she affirms that she used that time wisely. She raised her kids, she got educated, she built a business, and she got therapy, all funded by a man who thought he was exploiting her. That reversal of power is subtle but devastating. By the end of the story, she has not only escaped the marriage, she's risen above it. She has financial freedom, a fulfilling career, grown children, a new partner, and, most crucially, a hard-won sense of control over her life. The final lines are the embodiment of her transformation. She's in love again but firm in her boundaries: no marriage, no cohabitation, no risks to her newfound peace. She is done with systems that can turn stability into a battleground. Her trauma has taught her the price of dependence and the pain of legal entanglement, and she refuses to relive that. This decision, like every other one in the story, is made not from fear but from strength and clarity. In the end, this story is not about revenge as much as it is about reclamation. Reclamation of voice, security, respect, and most of all, self. It's about how some victories come not in loud explosions, but in the quiet closing of a door you never intend to walk through again. This woman was handed betrayal and used it as blueprints for freedom. Her story is not gentle, but it is fierce, deliberate, and unapologetically triumphant. I got passed over for 2 separate jobs for what feels like a very ridiculous reason. I'm not sure if this fits here or not, but I'm annoyed and angry and I can't fire off my frustration at the proper parties involved. Without giving too much away in case someone at my job were to ever see this post and start making some connections, I've been at my current place of employment for about 3 years. Recently, I've been trying to move to other sections within my department so that I could learn new skills as much as I can before I move on elsewhere. I'd first applied for another position entirely in a different sector of my department earlier this year, and had made it to the interview, but didn't get it. I was just told that the candidate who did get it fit more along with what that area was looking for in an employee, so I chalked it up to the notion that they had more experience than me. Fair is fair, there, and I was disappointed because the position would have given me a bit of a pay bump in the process of learning something new, but I understood what I assumed to be the case, which I'll come back to in a minute. Fast forward to a couple of weeks ago, and a position opened up again in another area of my department. Same job description as what I do now, but entirely different job duties, so it would have just been a sideways transition, but I had to interview for it as opposed to just being placed into it. Made it to the interview, but wound up not getting it either. Again, I assumed that the person who did was just more qualified to do the things they were asking, and was still disappointed, but if it came down to specific qualifications, I understood, even though, as I said, it was the exact same position as what I currently do, but different duties. I later found out that the reason why I didn't get either position is because of what I'd done in the interviews. Prior to the first interview, I'd written down some helpful information to reference based on some of the operations of both the department in general and based on the specific area I was trying to get into. I'd Googled some helpful interview tips, and in each source I saw, LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, to name a few, all stated that having some notes to fall back on makes you appear as though you're really trying your hardest to stand out in the interview as opposed to BSing your answers. Someone on the panel thought differently, however, not liking that I did so, but no one communicated to me after the fact that this was the case, so I wouldn't do it again. I proceeded to reference notes again in the second interview for one of the questions that was asked, and that was my second undoing, because the same person who had an issue with it the first time was also on the second interview panel. So, to recap, I didn't get passed over for both positions because I didn't know the answers to the questions being asked. It wasn't entirely because of my skill level or amount of job knowledge. Again, I've been here 3 years, and certainly know a whole lot more than I did when I first started. It wasn't even because of how I interviewed in general, because they'd all told me that I did a nice job despite being visibly nervous. It was because I utilized notes to keep my nervousness from having me falter on information I actually did know about in some capacity, even if there were certain areas I didn't have hands-on experience with, and because someone dropped the ball after my first interview and didn't warn me about what not to do going forward, making me inadvertently make the same mistake a second time, trying to prepare myself as best as possible in my efforts to move around / up as high and far as I could go given my current skill set. I've been fuming about this since I found out what I found out, and I can't really vent to anyone on the job without making a disappointing situation worse for myself, and, now, any opportunities one had to get out of what I'm currently doing have been filled, with new opportunities being very few and far in between. Unfortunately for me, everyone likes their jobs up here. It's also making it very difficult to maintain a professional relationship with some of the parties involved in this because I find the reasoning to be incredibly petty, and I'm not sure what to do with my feelings. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a masterclass in quiet professionalism clashing with the arbitrary politics of workplace culture. It's not loud or explosive. It doesn't involve betrayal, abuse, or even direct confrontation, but it captures something deeply relatable and maddening, the experience of doing everything right and still being punished for it. The narrator, an employee of 3 years trying to grow within their department, walks us through a series of job rejections that don't stem from poor qualifications, bad behavior, or lack of initiative, but from something as absurdly benign as using notes in an interview. What emerges is a story of silent injustice, unspoken expectations, and the frustrating opacity of professional advancement. What stands out immediately is the narrator's measured tone. They're not asking for sympathy, and they don't lash out. They lay out the facts, they prepared thoroughly, researched proper interview etiquette from reputable sources, and tried to compensate for nerves with strategic note-taking. The irony is rich. What the internet hails as best practice for job interviews was perceived by at least one panel member as a lack of professionalism or preparedness. This discrepancy between external expectations and internal politics forms the heart of the story's tension. The narrator was penalized not for a failure of competence but for violating an unspoken aesthetic standard, some intangible idea of what confidence and readiness are supposed to look like. But the deeper issue here is not the use of notes. It's the lack of transparency. After the first rejection, no one offered feedback or direction. No one said, "Here's what we'd prefer you do next time." The narrator, trying to be better, simply repeated what they thought worked only to unknowingly commit the same offense twice. This isn't just a personal grievance, it's a systemic flaw in the way many organizations handle internal promotions and employee development. If feedback isn't shared, growth isn't possible. And if a single person's subjective opinion can derail an otherwise strong candidate, the process isn't meritocratic, it's performative. The story also speaks to the silent cost of professionalism. The narrator doesn't rage. They don't burn bridges. They don't scream or demand justice. They internalize the slight, bite their tongue, and continue showing up in the same workplace where they were quietly dismissed, not for their lack of talent, but for a moment of visible preparation. And while they're trying to maintain composure, they're also seething. That contradiction, being expected to stay cordial, helpful, and engaged with people who subtly sabotaged your progress, is what makes this story quietly devastating. There's also something particularly disheartening about how trivial the reason for rejection was. Notes. Notes. The thing that's supposed to demonstrate thoughtfulness, initiative, and humility, willingness to admit you don't remember every single fact in the moment, is turned against them. It speaks to the larger, unspoken culture of many workplaces where appearances, vibes, and unwritten rules matter more than substance. Where being polished trumps being prepared. Where fitting a mold matters more than showing promise. And yet, the narrator shows restraint and resilience. They keep working. They don't implode. But beneath that surface is exhaustion, alienation, and the bitterness that comes from realizing that effort alone isn't enough to move forward. The sadness in the story isn't just about two missed opportunities, it's about how those moments have made the narrator feel boxed in, how the illusion of growth within the organization has cracked, revealing just how arbitrary and politicized mobility can be. If this story has a resolution, it's a quiet one. The narrator will continue, but their trust in the system has eroded. They now know that doing their best won't always be enough. And perhaps, more tragically, they know that authenticity, like using notes to stay grounded, isn't always welcomed in spaces where image is everything. In the end, this isn't a story about rejection. It's a story about disappointment, about what it feels like when the people in charge of your growth decide, silently and subjectively, that you're not the right kind of candidate, no matter how hard you try. And that's the kind of story that lingers. Quietly. Painfully. And all too often. A letter I'll never send to my wife about why we never truly understood each other. I wrote this recently, trying to understand what went wrong. It's not something I'll send, but maybe it helps someone else feel less alone. I hope it means something to someone or helps them feel seen. The Tree and the Bowl. To my wife. One of the biggest reasons it has always been so difficult for us to truly get along is because we see the world completely differently. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. There are billions of people on this earth, and countless more who have ever lived, each one their own person, living a life that could never be exactly replicated. Even the weather sometimes matters. Everything matters. And so we are different. From what I understand, you move through the world with your eyes closed, feeling everything, making your decisions based on the feeling that rises inside you. It's not about me. It's about what something makes you feel, and your body seems trained to believe you are about to be hurt. You brace for it. You have always braced for it. In the beginning, you were scared. Later, you became reluctant. Then you told me that you simply wanted to oppress people, and you thought I was making you submissive, because that's what you believed I desired. After that, it became hate. The fundamental problem between us is that you often develop strong feelings before sentences are even finished. It means you are not reacting to what I say. You are reacting to the feeling you already had. And over time, those feelings that once sometimes softened, now only sharpen. They go from bad to worse. At our core, we are different. When you speak, I try to listen to everything, to blend it all together, like ingredients in a chili. Each one matters. Each flavor influences the whole. I try not to add emotions that aren't already there. I try to experience what is, before deciding what it means. But you feel early, quickly, deeply. And when you feel something, it becomes immovable. It becomes reality. You truly believe I want to suppress your voice, when I only ever wish to quiet it, to soothe it. The two things are not the same. I live inside the moment, inside the totality of what is being said. And I haven't always been good at it, but I have always tried. Now, I'm simply better at it. I don't think my way of being is better than yours. In fact, I believe your way is deeply important for human survival. Feeling so quickly, so intensely, it protected us once. I only wish whatever happened to you hadn't left you trapped in survival mode. Because you were already living inside it when I met you. You've told me so, not in those words, but through the stories you shared, the way you flinched from life. And the pain you carry, it is not your fault. It's like having a fever, not something you chose, but something your body had to do in order to survive what was happening to it. I have never judged you for this. I could never judge anyone for surviving. You say I am emotionless. But I feel everything. I just do not become what I feel. You feel a wave and ride it, and it carries you where it will. I feel a wind pass through my leaves. And when the wind is gone, I am still. There is nothing wrong with either way of being. I only wish you had been given a bowl filled with love before I ever found you. Because if you had, I would have made it overflow for the rest of your life. But now, somehow, I can't even convince you that I ever tried. Let me analyze this story for you. This piece, The Tree and the Bowl, reads like a love letter never sent, but also like a quiet elegy for a relationship that collapsed under the weight of emotional misalignment. It's haunting, introspective, and composed with restraint that makes the hurt even sharper. It's not a confession or a plea, it's a final sorting of emotional truths after years of trying to bridge an unbridgeable gap. And like all stories of emotional disconnection between two people who once loved each other, it is devastating in its stillness. At its core, this is a story of incompatible emotional languages. The narrator lays out the difference with metaphor and clarity. One partner moves through the world as a tree, steady, rooted, reacting slowly and with intention. The other is like a wave, emotional and immediate, experiencing the world through sensations that strike and stick before thought can intervene. These aren't framed as faults, just truths. The narrator is not bitter, just tired and mournfully aware that their attempts to connect were never perceived as connection. What makes the story powerful is its compassion. There is no attempt to villainize the wife, even as the narrator acknowledges the pain she caused. In fact, he seems to understand why she hurt him. She lives in survival mode, flinching from life, expecting pain even in safe moments. Her emotions arrive fully formed, often before words do. And though this frustrates him, though it likely destroyed the relationship, he still writes, "I have never judged you for this. I could never judge anyone for surviving." That line alone is enough to crack your chest open. This is not a story about blame. It's about misunderstanding, deep, persistent, gut-level misunderstanding. The narrator tried to communicate, tried to listen to every flavor in the chili, tried to be still and rational and gentle. But the partner did not experience that as love. She experienced it as suppression, as coldness, as emotional distance. Her nervous system, honed by trauma or early damage, perceived even gentleness as a threat. And over time, that misreading hardened into resentment, then rejection, then hate. The narrator's heartbreak is not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, tired, suffused with a kind of grief that comes only after you've accepted there's nothing else you can say to be understood. The most painful line might be, "I only wish you had been given a bowl filled with love before I ever found you. Because if you had, I would have made it overflow for the rest of your life." There is no anger in that. Only longing. He is not angry that she was broken, he's devastated that she couldn't accept his love because of the break someone else gave her. It's a story about the limits of love. About how love can try and still fail when people speak different emotional dialects. The narrator didn't lack affection. He lacked access to her feelings, to her perceptions, to the place inside her that could believe in calm. This kind of misalignment is tragic because it isn't anyone's fault. It's two lives colliding at the wrong angles. One person finds meaning in stillness. The other finds survival in intensity. Neither is wrong. Neither is right. But together, they destroy each other, not violently, but slowly, through misunderstanding, mistrust, and the feeling of being invisible even while trying your hardest to be seen. Stylistically, the writing is elegant but raw. The metaphors, the tree, the bull, the chile, the wave, are grounded and beautiful, never overreaching. They carry emotional weight without melodrama. The piece reads like someone who has spent years trying to put words to what went wrong, and finally found a way to do it that doesn't attack, but still tells the truth. And maybe that's what this piece is really about, the loneliness of loving someone who doesn't experience the world the way you do, and the quiet dignity of letting them go when you realize your love can't reach them, not because it wasn't enough, but because they never had a place to hold it. This isn't a letter. It's a farewell. And a gentle one. I hate my brother-in-law for what he did on my wedding day. Pretty much the title. My spouse, 26, and I, 27, got married earlier this year, hooray. The ceremony was extremely small and personal, and it was all we could ask for. Unfortunately, this is where the good times, with the family, not my spouse, ended. Here's some backstory. My spouse's brother, referred to as Steve in the rest of the post, is 32 years old. He was a delivery driver for years until he unexpectedly quit. He was in and out of jobs for a couple of years until landing a DoorDash gig. No shade to any job, money is money at the end of the day. Steve knew about the trip for at least 4 months. He lives at home with his parents, and has little to no bills. Despite all of this, Steve did not save any money for the trip and admitted to spending his money on vapes and weed. In fact, Steve began the trip bragging that his bank account balance was $25 in the negative. This will be relevant later. Here's what happened. Our wedding was in a tourist location known for various liquor and wine tastings. The night before our ceremony, my mother-in-law, family friend, spouse, and I went on a bar crawl. Safe to say we all were pleasantly intoxicated, not enough to be a nuisance, but enough to stumble back to our hotel. Notably absent from this night out was my spouse's brother, 32, Steve. The next day, the day of the wedding, as I mentioned, went swimmingly until the evening. In celebration of our nuptials we decided as a family that it was booze cruise night too. The original entourage, MIL, family friend, spouse, myself, was joined by my new brother-in-law, Steve. It is important to note that Steve had zero money to his name, and since drinking costs money, he was freeloading on this booze cruise. The original group did not drink as heavily this time. We were sufficiently buzzed, but not stumbling drunk. We decided to cut ourselves off, as responsible drinkers do, and this is where the night began to turn. It was when we decided to cease drinking that Steve grew grumpy. He moaned, "I wish I would have been there the first night, only, he was there, he chose not to tag along because, tourist towns suck." Steve then tried to pressure the rest of us to continue drinking. After continuous refusals, we convinced Steve it was time for dinner and a nightcap. We were seated at the restaurant. We all ordered water and then we had our individual drink orders. I ordered a glass of wine, my spouse ordered a cocktail, and Steve ordered a shot of Jack Daniels and a beer. Reminder, he was ordering these drinks on my spouse's tab. When our waters arrived, my spouse shot a paper straw wrapper at Steve, then Steve returned the favor. Then our specialty drinks arrived. My spouse then grabbed the extra straw that came with their drink and shot an additional wrapper at Steve. All hell broke loose. Steve yelled, "If I can't get you back, then you can't shoot me with a straw wrapper." He then downed the Jack Daniels, aggressively threw the glass across the table and into the appetizer trays. Fortunately, nothing broke, but the noise brought the entire world to a standstill. Steve stormed off and that was the last we saw of him that night. You would think this is where the story ends, but my spouse and I caught up with MIL the next morning and she filled us in on what transpired. The rest is per MIL's recollection when we grabbed breakfast at 8 a.m. the next day. Apparently, before the booze cruise, MIL gave Steve petty cash for knickknacks and drinks so that he could pay for things himself. Remember, Steve didn't pay for a single tasting. So, what did he do with the money he squirreled away? Well, after Steve stormed out of the restaurant, he drank himself into oblivion. He was so inebriated that my MIL received a call at 3 in the morning from a local bar telling her to pick up Steve before they called the cops. My MIL then got out of bed, woke up my FIL who has ailing health and mobility issues, picked Steve up and headed back to the hotel. However, as they were nearing the hotel, Steve escaped. We don't know whether he jumped out of the car or fled from the bar on foot. Nevertheless, he ran down an alley, rolled his ankle, lost his shoes and his phone. He was then coaxed back into the car and finally put to bed at 4 in the morning. The next day he left and my spouse and I have refused to talk to him ever since. A week later my spouse received an apology text from Steve in which he stated that he was blackout drunk at the restaurant. I doubt this as there were no other signs of that level of drunkenness, and he regretted his actions. He also stated that his biggest regret was not ruining our wedding night, but yelling at his mom. While both are awful, his need to include that in his apology made the whole message ring hollow. We have not replied to him since. TLDR, on the night of my wedding, my BIL got drunk, made a fool of himself and ruined the mood of what was supposed to be a wonderful night. Let me analyze this story for you. This story, I hate my brother-in-law for what he did on my wedding day, is, on the surface, about an intoxicated and immature man disrupting a meaningful night. But just under the surface, it's about something deeper, the pain of watching someone willfully choose self-destruction and drag others down with them and doing it on the one night that was supposed to be untouchable. At its core, this is a story of betrayal and resentment disguised as party chaos. Steve is not just a bad guest. He is a ticking bomb of entitlement, arrested development, and unresolved frustration, and the narrator makes it clear from the beginning, this wasn't a sudden meltdown. This was a long time coming. The night of the wedding just gave him the stage. Let's unpack this. Steve is 32, older than everyone else involved, yet shows the least maturity. He had months of notice about the trip, zero major responsibilities, and still showed up flat broke, not even a token attempt to participate like an adult. That's not harmless, that's passive exploitation, banking on others to carry him without consequence. His refusal to join the group on the first night, then sulking that he wasn't part of it, reveals the deep entitlement and martyrdom that define his personality. He wants inclusion without effort, reward without engagement. When the group stops drinking, he doesn't just get moody, he gets manipulative. His push to keep the party going wasn't about fun. It was about control. He didn't like that others were calling it a night because it reminded him that he wasn't the center of the experience. The straw wrapper incident wasn't the cause of the outburst, it was the excuse. The pressure had already been building, and that moment gave him the perfect justification to turn a petty grievance into a public tantrum. His outburst, slamming a glass across the table, storming off, wasn't about straws. It was about resentment and humiliation at not being the one everyone was orbiting. This story is also about grief. Not of death, but of hope. Weddings aren't just rituals, they're emotional tipping points. They don't just add someone new to the family, they expose everything that's already wrong. And here, the narrator is realizing, this man is not just inconsiderate, he is incapable of being part of their future. The details that follow, the 3 a.m. rescue call, the drunken escape, the injury, the lost phone, the parents dragged from bed to handle their grown son, these aren't funny anymore. They're tragic. The way Steve's self-destruction forces his aging, ill father to get up and help him like a toddler shows just how corrosive his behavior is. He doesn't just hurt himself, he bleeds into everyone else's peace. And perhaps the most quietly painful piece of the story, Steve's apology. "I was blackout drunk" is a dodge. The narrator doesn't believe it, and neither do we. His biggest regret being that he yelled at his mom, not the people whose wedding he disrupted, is telling. Even in apology, Steve centers himself and his selective guilt. It's a selfish confession dressed as remorse. The narrator and their spouse's decision to go no contact after the text isn't vindictive. It's protective. Not out of hate, but out of love for each other, and a need to keep their future safe from someone who will always find a way to ruin the moment. Stylistically, the story is told with rising tension and pointed detail. It begins with humor and a casual tone, but that tone shifts expertly as the events spiral out. The narrator uses light sarcasm and parentheticals, "Reminder he was ordering these drinks on my spouse's tab," to emphasize the absurdity, but by the time we reach the 3 a.m. bar call, the mood has turned. What began as a cringy family anecdote has morphed into a portrait of a family hostage to one man's immaturity. This is a story about the final straw, both literal and metaphorical. A wedding night ruined by a grown child in a man's body. And a newlywed couple who now realize that some people do not deserve second chances just because they share blood. This isn't a tantrum, it's a boundary. And it's about time. Just ran away from a Grindr hookup, I'm scared. Hi, I've never posted anything here, this just happened like 20 minutes ago and I'm honestly shaking and I just want to vent and hear some opinions. So I, 24M, was looking for hookups on Grindr. I know, bad idea to start, when an account that had already talked to me at least 5 other times said hello, the other messages were all the same, I just never responded. BC, I wasn't really attracted to him by his PP, he looked like 40 and I usually don't hook up with people that far from my age, and id why, but this time I responded. The conversation was pretty straightforward. His profile already said that he was looking for a hookup, that he liked feminine young men, preferably hairless or shaved, and that were down to use female lingerie. I don't meet those standards lol, but I replied anyway. He said he liked femboys, but nothing about body hair or lingerie on the chat, I'm just young and a bottom lol. We arranged IR pretty quick, which is kind of a red flag now that I think about it. He had a white windowless van, another red flag, that we could use somewhere private outside the city. My city is small and has big farmlands around, so those surrounding areas are pretty empty. We exchanged photos and I actually liked what I saw, cause it wasn't that he was ugly, it was mostly about the age thing, but I was into it now. I told him the street where I live, but told him to meet me a couple of blocks away from my house for security reasons. Now is when it gets scary for me. When he arrived, I tried to look at the license plate but couldn't really cause he parked kinda fast in front of me and opened the door. But he didn't really look like the picture, he looked a bit older and skinnier, so I hesitated a little but was already with my foot in there. He looked at me and said, "Hurry up, someone could see," which isn't really that weird in the Grindr hookup world, but scared me a little more. Now get mad at me, I still entered the van. Why really? I know I have a really big problem saying no to most stuff, but this was scaring me from the moment he arrived and I still went inside SMH. Once there, he said he didn't have condoms so we went to a gas station literally a block away, and I was so freaked out already, my mind was running in circles trying to make up an excuse or just how to tell him I wasn't interested anymore, but when we arrived at the station, I had an idea. He left the keys in and went inside. I was afraid he would catch me running away midway through so I waited until it was his turn so he would be distracted. Once the cashier started talking to him, I opened the door, left it semi-closed to not make a sound, and just ran. I was like 4 blocks from my house, but the surrounding streets of the gas station are big open avenues, and I wanted to be in a much more private enclosed area so he couldn't find me that easily. I tried to use alleyways and look at every direction all the time to see if he was following me, 'cause I didn't want him to find where I live. I must have looked insane, lol. When I was just getting to my apartment, I saw a white van passing by, but if it was him or not, I hid. Now I'm here, writing this, still scared. I know I was an asshole for leaving the van with the keys on and everything, but I was really panicking. I don't know what to do now. I blocked his profile on Grindr, and actually I don't think I'm gonna use it for a while. Thank you if you read it all, and thanks in advance for your replies. Let me analyze this story for you. This story, just ran away from a Grindr hookup, I'm scared, is a raw, vulnerable account of survival instinct clashing with the paralyzing fear of confrontation. It's not just about a bad hookup. It's about what happens when boundaries are blurred, gut feelings are ignored, and someone finds themselves on the edge of something that could have gone very, very wrong. At its core, this is a story about a near miss with danger and how hard it is to say no, even when everything in your body is screaming that you should. The emotional architecture of the story: fear, shame, and clarity. From the first paragraph, we know the narrator is shaken. I'm honestly shaking, they write. This isn't a story of embarrassment. It's a story of fear, the kind that comes when the social norms and politeness we're trained to follow suddenly put us in danger. The narrator knows all the red flags. A white, windowless van. A hookup outside of town, away from anyone who might intervene. A man older than he appeared in photos. Rushing the narrator into the vehicle, literally saying, "Hurry up, someone could see." These are not subtle signs. But the narrator's response is not uncommon. They override their intuition out of politeness, pressure, and habit. They admit, "I know I have a really big problem saying no." This is a quiet tragedy for so many people, especially queer men navigating a world of hypersexualized, low-commitment spaces like Grindr, where consent is often assumed, and hesitation is frowned upon. The turning point is not the van. It's the gas station. By the time they're in the van, it's too late to pretend it's casual. This isn't about sex anymore. It's about escape. And that's where the most important part of the story happens. The narrator doesn't freeze. They strategize. They wait. They watch for the moment of distraction, and they run. This is a survival story. It might not involve violence, but it involves the exact same instinct: find the door, find the exit, get to safety. And they do. Barefoot in a mental sense, but running for their life. What's unspoken but present: this wasn't just creepy. It could have been catastrophic. He didn't look like his photos. That alone isn't a crime, but it's often a sign of deliberate deception. He rushed the narrator, pressured them to enter the van immediately. The hookup was to take place outside the city, in isolated farmland, with no condoms, and a stranger behind the wheel. This setup has every hallmark of a potential assault, or worse. The narrator might be minimizing it, maybe I overreacted, but every instinct they followed was correct. This story is also about shame, but not the kind it should be. The narrator says, "I know I was an asshole for leaving the van with the keys on and everything." No. You were not. You were terrified and had every reason to be. That van is not your responsibility. Your safety is. There's a broader, sadder commentary here about how queer men, especially young ones, are often expected to navigate dangerous situations with grace, humor, and zero pushback. The narrator apologizes to a stranger who put them in danger. That's the legacy of a culture that still teaches queer people their safety is secondary to someone else's expectations. Stylistically, the story is urgent and confessional. It's written like a breathless recounting, full of spiraling thoughts and self-checks, mirroring the mental fog and adrenaline of a traumatic experience. This makes the story feel real, close, and heartbreaking. The tone moves from disbelief, to fear, to guilt, to relief, but not resolution. The narrator made it out, but they are not okay yet. This story is not about a Grindr hookup gone wrong. It's about someone learning the cost of silence, and the power of listening to fear. It's a warning. Not just about creeps and vans, but about the way people can train themselves to ignore their own alarm bells out of politeness, validation seeking, or inexperience. And most of all, it's a reminder. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to run. You are allowed to choose survival over explanation. This narrator did. And they're here to tell the story. If you'd like, I can help you craft a version of this story as a personal essay, or a public post that raises awareness. It's powerful, and you told it with courage. My parents took me out of school in 2nd grade, and I'll never forgive them for what they took from me. When I was in 2nd grade, I was thriving. Teachers told my parents I was ahead of my grade in reading, in math, in everything. I was a bright kid with a future. I loved learning. I was doing well. I was happy. Then they ripped it all away. They pulled me out of school and said they were going to homeschool me. But they didn't. Not really. What they did was lock me in a house and feed me religion. That's it. No math. No writing. No science. No guidance. Nothing. I was 8 or 9 years old, and that was the last time I got a real education. From that point on, I wasn't allowed to leave the house alone. Not to go outside, not to meet friends, not even to walk around the block. I was only allowed out if I was with them, and even then, it was just to places like the grocery store. That was my entire life for almost a decade. I was completely cut off from the world. I didn't have friends. I didn't have school. I didn't even know how to talk to people my own age. All I had was the internet. I'd sit on Discord just listening to people talk and laugh and have fun, wishing I could join in but too scared to speak. I didn't know how. I'd watch YouTubers hanging out with their friends, going to dinner, seeing movies, living normal lives, and I'd cry wondering what that felt like. We never went to restaurants. Never had real celebrations. Never made memories. I was just there. A kid trapped in a house, wasting away while the world passed me by. I used to think they were protecting me. That they loved me. That they were just strict because they cared. But now I know the truth. They didn't care. Or if they did, they cared in the worst, most damaging way possible. They destroyed me. When I turned 18, I finally got a job. I started paying bills. I still lived in the house for a bit, but everything changed once I had money. Suddenly I had a little freedom. But the damage was already done. Today, I make $29 an hour. I work hard. I'm trying to build a life. But I still struggle every single day. My brain is behind. I can't pick up on simple things at work, sometimes basic instructions, stuff other people get right away. Socially, I still feel like I'm faking it, like I'm copying other people just to get by. Because I never got to learn those things when I was supposed to. Sometimes it feels like I don't even know who I am. It kills me. Every single day I wonder who I could have been if they hadn't done this to me. I was smart. I was going somewhere. And they stopped me. They chose to stop me. I'm furious. I'll never forgive them. I'll never understand what the hell they were thinking. What was their plan? What did they think would happen? That I'd magically be okay after being locked away for over a decade? They stole my future. They stole my childhood. And I have to live with that for the rest of my life. Now I look at my newborn son and my hopefully one day to be wife, and I wonder if I'll ever be enough for them. She tells me I already am. That I'm more than enough. But deep down, I'm scared I'll never be able to give them the life they truly deserve. I know I'd never do to my son what was done to me. I'll make sure he knows how important education is. I just hope I can be the father he needs, but I'm scared I'll never live up to his expectations. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a profound and heartbreaking account of a life derailed not by fate or accident, but by the willful choices of those meant to nurture and protect. It begins with a child full of promise, intelligence, and curiosity, thriving in the 2nd grade, praised by teachers, clearly on a path toward growth and achievement. There's no ambiguity in those early moments. The narrator was doing well, happy, eager to learn, socially and intellectually alive. And then, in one fateful decision, everything changed. Their parents pulled them out of school under the guise of homeschooling, but what followed wasn't education in any form. It was neglect masquerading as piety, control justified by faith. They were cut off, not just from school, but from the world itself. No social contact, no outings beyond errands under supervision, no friends, no birthdays, no joy. The isolation wasn't incidental, it was engineered. And it didn't last weeks or months. It lasted years. The emotional tone of the story is complex, shaped by sorrow, disbelief, varied trauma, and deep, abiding rage. This isn't the kind of hurt that heals with time, it's the kind that calcifies, becomes part of the bones. The narrator doesn't just mourn what was taken, they are haunted by the person they might have become. Because what was stolen wasn't just knowledge, it was language, it was freedom, it was identity. They weren't just denied books and lessons, they were denied the mirror of peers, the rituals of growth, the thousand small interactions that teach a child how to be a person. Locked in a house, fed a single worldview, denied even the simple pleasure of walking around the block, what was once a curious child was effectively shuttered away from humanity. The scars are everywhere. The narrator describes the constant effort required just to function in a world they were never prepared for. At work, they struggled to absorb instructions others take for granted. In conversation, they mimic the rhythms and words of people around them, performing normalcy rather than living it. Their sense of self remains fractured. The emotional cost of their parents' decision is incalculable, not just in opportunities lost, but in basic self-trust, in the ability to believe they are capable, worthy, whole. There's something especially painful about the moment when they describe watching YouTubers laugh in live, or listening to friends on Discord without speaking, because it captures what's most cruel about their upbringing. They were made to watch life from the outside, like a ghost in their own timeline. Yet for all the devastation, this story is also steeped in a quiet, reluctant hope. As much as the narrator feels broken, they are also building. They work hard. They earn a good wage. They have a partner who sees their worth, and a newborn son who represents something sacred, the chance to begin again, to rewrite the story. There's no cheap optimism here, just the complicated reality of healing while still bleeding. The narrator isn't naive about what's been lost, nor do they pretend to be free of fear. In fact, one of the most painful parts of the story is their doubt that they will be enough for their own child, that the damage they carry might limit the love they're able to give. But within that fear is a deeper truth. The fact that they are asking those questions at all is proof of their worth as a parent. They know what was done to them, and they vow, consciously, actively, with everything they have, to never repeat it. That's not just healing. That's heroism. At its core, this story is about the long, hard shadow of stolen childhood. It's about a system of control disguised as care, and about the quiet bravery it takes to claw your way back into life after being shut out for so long. But even more than that, it's about love, not the kind the narrator received, but the kind they now give. It's about the staggering courage it takes to raise a child while still raising yourself. To look into your son's eyes and promise him something you were never given: safety, freedom, respect. The narrator's journey is far from over, and their pain is still present. But so is their strength. And in telling this story, they aren't just processing the past, they're reclaiming it. They are refusing to be defined by what was done to them. And that, in the end, is a kind of freedom their parents never imagined they'd find. I feel uncomfortable about how friendly my husband and my sister have been with one another. My husband and I have been married for 2 years but together for 14. After we got married, my sister visited us often, and I feel like they've gotten very friendly in their interactions. At first, I was glad that they got along well. It makes sense, they're kind of similar in their personality and sense of humor, so it makes sense that they would click. But lately I noticed that they seem to have their own inside jokes, like we would all, me, my husband, my sister and my other siblings, be sitting together and talking, and somebody would say something that one of them thought was funny, and that person would look to the other and laugh over the joke that no one else understood. They would explain if I asked what they were laughing about, but after a few times, I just started to feel weirdly left out, like they had something special that I wasn't a part of. They would also text, and it's all just funny back and forth banter, memes, he showed me, and normal day-to-day stuff. There's nothing unusual about those texts, but it bothered me all the same. When we all eat together, he would take food from the big sharing/serving plate and give it to me. We're Chinese, but also to her, just in an offhand way, and I know he's probably just being nice and caring and not really thinking too much about it. He would tease her about stuff, which in itself should be fine because he teases everyone, it's a sense of humor, and she would reply with some witty retort or sometimes playfully kick or hit him on the arm, which she also does with me and other people, but for some reason, it bothers me when she does it to him. They're both just being themselves, doing things that I've seen them also do with other people. I know there is nothing going on, and I know they love me and would never hurt me intentionally, but I just am. I feel hurt, jealous and a little betrayed, and I hate myself for feeling like this, because it feels petty. I have brought this up with my husband, and he has explained that he's just being friendly, but that he would stop and minimize his interactions with her if I'd like, because it'd be the same to him either way, and what's most important to him is that I'm happy. He was very kind about it, but I'm hesitant to say yes, and to ask my sister to do the same, because I fear that it'll make things awkward for them, because we see our families, both mine and his, and hang out very often, but also because I can't seem to shake the idea that I'm being immature and unfair. My husband is part of the family now, so of course he will and should form relationships with other members of the family. It's not for me to dictate how other people form bonds with others, and it's ridiculous to think I can. Their texts and interactions are harmless and friendly in nature. I cannot think of a valid reason to justify asking them to change how they interact, and I feel crazy for feeling the way I do, like an excessively jealous and possessive lover. I've never thought of myself as particularly jealous and possessive, and I'm startled by how I am reacting to all this. I don't know what's become of me. I have been trying to get over it by myself, and it's been a year and it still bothers me, albeit on and off. Sometimes I would make it through a whole gathering without feeling particularly uncomfortable about their interactions. Other times I would notice something and it would trigger the same spiral in my head, like last weekend, and it's always such tiny things, too. I feel like I'm losing my mind a little, and I hate myself for this. I feel like I'm going to ruin it for everyone by being like this, and I don't know what to do. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a delicate, emotionally layered account of a woman grappling with the complex intersection of love, loyalty, insecurity, and familial bonds. On the surface, nothing overtly threatening or inappropriate has occurred. There are no secret rendezvous, no suggestive texts, no signs of betrayal in the traditional sense. And yet, beneath that calm exterior lies a growing unease that refuses to be rationalized away. The narrator's discomfort isn't about infidelity in the usual sense, but rather the quiet, ambiguous kind of closeness between her husband and her sister that seems, in moments, to exclude her. And this exclusion, subtle as it may be, cuts deep. What unfolds is not so much a confrontation with betrayal, but a confrontation with her own vulnerability, one that has crept up slowly, uninvited, and taken root in the space where trust once sat comfortably. The emotional complexity of this story lies in the narrator's self-awareness. She knows, intellectually, that there's likely nothing wrong. She knows that her husband loves her deeply, as evidenced by his immediate willingness to adjust his behavior for her sake. She knows that her sister has no malicious intent. She knows that their interactions are visible, open, even ordinary on paper, shared jokes, friendly teasing, memes. And yet, she cannot ignore the gnawing feeling that something about it all feels off, not dangerous or scandalous, just off. This discomfort isn't driven by jealousy in the traditional, possessive sense. It's something quieter, more insidious, the fear of emotional displacement. It's the subtle ache of watching two people you love form a connection that you're not entirely a part of, and not knowing what that says about your place in their lives. Her reaction is deeply human. When she observes her husband and sister share an inside joke or pass a knowing glance, it stings, not because she suspects something is happening, but because she fears she is being left out of something intimate. This fear of being left behind emotionally, of being replaceable in small, unnoticed ways, is often more destabilizing than the fear of outright betrayal. The narrator's turmoil is compounded by the fact that she knows her feelings may be irrational, which only leads to shame, self-doubt, and emotional spiraling. She criticizes herself harshly for having what she deems petty emotions, labeling herself immature, jealous, even crazy, despite the reality that emotional responses like hers are natural and often involuntary. This self-reproach makes her suffering even harder to manage, because she's not only hurt, she feels guilty for being hurt. What makes this story particularly poignant is the tension between what the narrator believes she should feel and what she actually does feel. She wants to be evolved, trusting, understanding. She wants to encourage meaningful relationships within her family. She wants to be the kind of partner who doesn't get rattled by harmless banter or physical closeness. But emotional safety is not built on ideals, it's built on felt experience. And what she feels, over and over again, is excluded. Not in big ways. Not in ways that anyone else would notice. But in small, persistent ways that wear down her sense of belonging. Importantly, her husband's response is not defensive or dismissive. He validates her feelings and offers to change his behavior, which reveals a strong foundation of empathy and commitment. But even this generous response doesn't fully resolve the narrator's dilemma, because her fear is not rooted in his intentions, but in her own emotional fragility. She worries that asking him or her sister to change will come off as controlling or unreasonable, which leaves her caught in a trap. Either she tolerates a dynamic that causes her pain, or she risks alienating the two people she cares about most. That's an impossible position to be in, and it's no wonder that, after a year of trying to get over it, she still finds herself emotionally stuck. At its core, this story is about emotional boundaries and the invisible lines between closeness and discomfort. It's about the slow erosion of confidence when you feel like an outsider in your own life. It's about how hard it is to advocate for yourself when your pain isn't obvious or easily explained. And perhaps most powerfully, it's about the hidden grief of realizing that even in relationships filled with love and good intentions, emotional harm can still happen. Not because anyone is doing something wrong, but because human connections are messy, layered, and sometimes painfully misaligned. The narrator's fear of ruining it for everyone is telling. It reflects the burden she carries alone, the way she sees herself as the problem rather than someone in pain. But her story isn't one of dysfunction or delusion. It's the story of someone trying to maintain balance in a world where emotional truths don't always align neatly with facts. She isn't crazy. She isn't weak. She's simply overwhelmed by something that doesn't have a clear label. And that, too, is part of being human. The only path forward may be continued communication, not just with her husband, but with herself, to remind her that her feelings are valid, her needs are real, and it's not selfish to want to feel secure in the relationships that matter most. My husband is annoying. Throwaway account because my husband is an avid Reddit user and also follows me. I have been with my husband for 8 years and married for 4. He has given me 2 beautiful sons, and he has a daughter from a previous relationship that we have every other week. I love my husband so deeply, but I'm not sure how long I can keep loving him because of how annoying he is. Hear me out. We are both in our early 30s. I can't watch a movie without this man starting to make funny sounds like beatboxing, rapping or shouting random words or phrases out loud. He is more rough with our sons than what they want him to be, and they can be rough, and it usually ends in tears. He throws them, pretends to beat them up, takes their stuff and runs off, calls them mean nicknames and plays practical jokes. I know I sound awful. I know it just looks like he's a loving dad heavily invested in his son's playtimes, but the boys really don't enjoy it. They nearly always beg him to stop, but it falls on deaf ears until I intervene. When the boys decide they want to play back, he immediately starts sulking and getting moody with them for being too rough. He is very insistent on creating his own questionable fashion choices and gets deeply hurt and offended if anyone tries to break it to him that, we worded in nicer times, he simply looks ridiculous. Examples of this would be his socks pulled up as high as they can go, usually up to his knees, and then he will roll his shorts up until they're about halfway up his thigh. This is just one example, I can list hundreds. He is an incredibly messy person to live with. His favorite habit is leaving his socks and boxers everywhere, tools everywhere, and just general day-to-day mess from not clearing up after himself. I love him deeply, and I do not feel I have the right to change someone, but I'm starting to think we are not compatible. I am worried I am just a huge buzzkill and my sons are very much like me. I'm worried he would be much happier in a jokey, non-serious family. I am worried I would be happier with a more serious man. I don't know who to talk to about this because everyone who knows us sees us as this picture-perfect family. There are daily arguments in our household. I am constantly having to separate him from our sons like he's also a child, and I can never enjoy adult time with him without him acting like a child. I don't know what to do other than just rant because it's eating me up inside. Our sons are 5 and 3. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a raw and emotionally conflicted reflection on the invisible weight of living with a partner who never truly grows up and how that can erode intimacy, respect, and connection over time. On the surface, the narrator's husband appears to be a playful, quirky, and deeply involved father, a man who loves his children, finds joy in being silly, and is unafraid to break convention. But the heart of the story reveals a far more complicated and painful reality. This isn't about minor personality clashes or occasional frustration, it's about the profound dissonance that arises when one partner becomes emotionally exhausting, more like an additional child than an equal. The narrator is not simply annoyed by her husband's antics, she's overwhelmed, exhausted, and quietly heartbroken by the slow unraveling of respect and compatibility in their marriage. His constant joking, attention-seeking behavior, and refusal to respect boundaries, especially their sons, isn't just irritating, it's harmful. His idea of love and play involves teasing, chaos, and domination, often pushing their children to tears despite their clear requests for him to stop. This creates a deeply unsettling emotional landscape, where the children's emotional boundaries are repeatedly ignored, and the narrator is cast in the role of peacekeeper, constantly stepping in, constantly mitigating harm. Over time, that repeated role morphs from care into quiet resentment. It's not just about parenting styles, though that is a major fault line here. It's also about emotional maturity and relational balance. The husband's relentless immaturity, his exaggerated fashion choices, and his need to be the center of attention, be it through loud noises during a movie or sulking when he doesn't get his way, paint a picture of someone who is not just quirky, but chronically self-absorbed and emotionally underdeveloped. This leaves the narrator emotionally alone in the relationship. She's not married to a partner who shares her adult world, one of emotional nuance, responsibility, and reflection, but to someone who refuses to leave the realm of impulsive boyishness. What makes her experience so painful is not simply that her husband is annoying, plenty of marriages survive mild to moderate annoyance. It's that she feels trapped. She feels like she's the only adult in the room, raising 3 children instead of 2, and trying to hold together the illusion of a picture-perfect family while privately shouldering emotional and mental burdens that no one else sees. The image of their life, what friends and family believe, is a cruel contrast to the exhausting emotional labor she performs every day. Her husband's behaviors, which might seem harmless or amusing from the outside, are, in her lived experience, an ever-present strain that leaves her lonely and emotionally starved. The story is steeped in guilt. The narrator is careful not to paint herself as cruel or ungrateful. She acknowledges that her husband has given her beautiful children, that he's not abusive or evil, and that she does love him deeply, she emphasizes. And yet, that love is deteriorating under the weight of unmet emotional needs, repeated frustrations, and a growing sense that they are fundamentally incompatible. She worries she's a buzzkill, a bad wife, someone who's trying to stifle joy. But what she's really trying to stifle is chaos. What she's craving isn't control, it's peace, maturity, and emotional safety. What's perhaps most tragic is how isolated she feels in this struggle. She can't tell anyone the truth about her marriage because the performance they all witness, the fun dad, the wacky husband, is so compelling. She doesn't know how to reconcile the external perception with her internal reality, which adds another layer of loneliness and guilt. To outsiders, she might seem ungrateful, uptight, or even cruel. But to those who truly understand the toll of long-term emotional labor, the real tragedy is clear. She's been partnered with someone who refuses to grow up, and in doing so, he's made her grow old too quickly, emotionally burdened, constantly managing, always compensating. The dilemma she faces isn't just whether to stay or leave, it's whether she can continue living in a version of love that demands so much of her, while giving her so little peace in return. She wants her family to work. She wants to protect her children from the fallout. She doesn't want to tear apart the home they've built. But deep down, she's beginning to realize that love alone isn't enough when there's no shared sense of emotional adulthood. And while she doesn't say it outright, the fear that whispers through every line of her story is devastatingly clear. What if this is as good as it gets? What if it never changes? What if I lose myself in the process of trying to hold this together? This story is not just a rant. It's the quiet unraveling of a woman who once believed that love could bridge every gap until she realized she'd been trying to build that bridge alone. My family cared more about my drug-dealing thug of a cousin getting out of prison than me graduating with an engineering degree. I graduated 4 weeks ago with an electrical engineering degree with a job already lined up. I invited my entire family on my mother's side to a party the Saturday after the ceremony. I'll just quantify the attendance for comparison. My mom, 2/3 grandparents, 2/5 siblings, and their kids, 3/9 aunts and uncles, 3/27 cousins, and their kids, showed up. We had fun, but my mom bought way too much food. We expected more people to come. I just chalked it up to people being too busy. Last week my cousin got out of his 6-year stay in prison for dealing crack. His sister threw him a party at her house Saturday and so many people showed up it had to be moved to a local park. In attendance, myself, my mother, all of his grandparents, 5/5 of my siblings, 8/9 aunts and uncles, 22/27 of my cousins and a ton of his friends and associates and family related to him but not me. I know it's probably petty for me to be bothered by this, but I can't help but feel most of my family doesn't care about how much effort and sacrifices I made to get here. I was kicked out by abusive, now dead, stepdad when I was 17 and barely passed high school because I had to work 2 part-time jobs to keep a roof over my head. My cousin and I both went to the same ghetto high school and I had to deal with years of bullying and harassment for being one of the smart kids acting white and having a lighter complexion. I'm half black. I had to work until I was 22 to save up money for college, and once I was able to start my degree it took 6 years to complete because I had to work full-time for the first 4 years until I landed a scholarship and transferred to a university to finish the degree. My cousin is 2 years older than me. In high school he hung out with the same groups of kids that used to bully me and others like me. He spent 2 years as a senior and never ended up graduating. He has a long rap sheet of being a shitty human being. He got in trouble at 16 for being in a group of men who mugged and beat up a father just walking home after work but somehow avoided juvie. At 19 he was busted for being part of a vehicle theft ring, got kicked out of high school and spent 2 years in prison. At 23 he was busted selling crack after getting pulled over for speeding. He was originally going to get out on parole after 4 years but kept getting into fights in prison. Everyone knows he's violent and abusive to others, even his many girlfriends. Yet, most of my family seems to love him. I don't understand how my family can just ignore how bad of a person he is. I spent 6 years working my ass off to get ahead and almost no one cares. He spent 6 years in prison for being a violent thug selling poison to his community and is celebrated like a hero just for being released. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is not just about family favoritism, it's about the heartbreaking collision between merit and dysfunction, effort and apathy, transformation and stagnation. It's about what it means to fight tooth and nail to build a better life, only to be overlooked in favor of someone who has spent most of theirs tearing things down. The narrator's pain runs deeper than hurt feelings over a poorly attended graduation party. It's the emotional reckoning that comes when you realize the people who were supposed to care the most about your triumphs don't. Or at least, not in the way they should. On its surface, the story is a tale of two celebrations, one honoring a life built through perseverance, and another celebrating the return of a cousin whose life has been defined by chaos, criminality, and violence. The narrator graduated with a degree in electrical engineering after overcoming an abusive home life, poverty, and social rejection. Their journey was hard one, paved with jobs held through school, bullying endured, and years spent working long hours while studying just to survive. What they accomplished should be monumental to their family. It is the embodiment of everything that breaks generational cycles. And yet, their achievement was met with silence, apathy, and the absence of most of their extended family. In contrast, the cousin, someone who, by every measurable standard, has harmed others and rejected opportunity, was welcomed home from prison with open arms and overwhelming support. The turnout to his celebration wasn't just larger, it was loud, joyful, and deeply communal. His flaws, his crimes, his repeated harm to others, were seemingly erased the moment he returned, while the narrator's accomplishments were barely acknowledged. That kind of comparison doesn't just sting. It destabilizes your entire sense of self-worth and belonging. This isn't just jealousy. It's existential grief. It's the realization that meritocracy, the belief that hard work leads to recognition and respect, doesn't always apply, especially within families where dysfunction, history, and tribal loyalty often outweigh fairness. The narrator's family appears to rally not around what's right, but around what's familiar, what's flashy, what fits their emotional narrative, even if it means turning a blind eye to someone's violence and toxicity. The cousin isn't loved for who he is, necessarily, he's loved for how well he plays a role. The prodigal son, the misunderstood bad boy, the one who gets cheered simply for surviving, no matter how much destruction he caused along the way. But the narrator? They were the quiet fighter. The one who left no trail of damage. The one who didn't need rescuing, but desperately needed support. Their success didn't dramatize the family's collective identity. It didn't validate their own choices or give them someone to fix. Instead, it reminded them of what they weren't, of the opportunities they missed, of the people they failed, and maybe even of the guilt they carry. Supporting the cousin might feel like redemption to them. Supporting the narrator might feel like confronting shame. That emotional calculus, rewarding dysfunction while neglecting hard-earned success, is soul-crushing. It leaves the narrator questioning their place in the family, their worth, even their identity. What does it mean to be good, to rise above, when your own blood doesn't seem to value it? There's a palpable sense of betrayal here, not just that the cousin was celebrated, but that the narrator was invisible. They're not just angry, they're heartbroken, disillusioned, and, most painfully, alone in their success. This story is also about how deeply class, race, and cultural expectations can shape the way families show love and pride. The narrator mentions being bullied for acting white and having a lighter complexion, suggesting that their success may have alienated them even more from a family that equates struggle and survival with authenticity. In that context, the cousin's return may feel more emotionally resonant to the family. His story fits the mold of what's expected and familiar. The narrator's doesn't. Their achievement becomes alien, even threatening, a mirror that reflects back everything the family isn't. Ultimately, this story is about grief for the celebration that never came, for the recognition that was never offered, for the familial love that feels contingent on failure rather than growth. The narrator doesn't want accolades or parades. They want to be seen. They want to feel like their pain and persistence meant something to the people who should have cared most. Instead, they're left wondering why someone who chose destruction gets more love than someone who chose to build. It's not petty to feel this way. It's human. It's devastating. And it speaks to a deeper wound, the one that comes from doing everything right in a world, or a family, that doesn't reward the right things. My fiancé and I broke up last night. My 6-year relationship ended last night. Now, I know this is Reddit, so you're expecting some Jerry Springer story. Over-the-top drama or fanfiction about cheating. This is not that, sorry to disappoint. It's two adults who sat down, talked, and realized this were not going to work out as we expected. I got laid off from my software job over a year ago. It was fully remote, and the industry for those kinds of jobs is so competitive I knew my next tech role would need to be at least partially on site. The industry where I'm at is non-existent, so I went back to serving this last year, and I hated it just as much as I did in college. I've been interviewing on and off for the last year, with very little luck. My fiancée is the opposite. Her job here is secure, a job she can ride for 40 years till retirement if she wanted. If she wants to change companies or roles, there's competition in the industry here she could go to. Relocating could happen if she wanted, but her family and friends are all here, and she very much wants to raise kids here. We talked about the possibilities of what would come when I got another job. We held out hope for a fully remote position, or one I could commute for. Those hopes never really panned out though. A month ago, a friend reached out with a position I fit really well in. It's at a company that will look amazing on my resume if I work there for a few years, and if I want to I could stay for a decade plus. From what he told me, I aced the interviews and am the guy they want. The problem is, it's on the other side of the USA and I will have to relocate. The fiancé and have talked it over several times this last month. What to do if I got the offer, what about her job, the logistics of everything? It did not look good. She doesn't want to move, but is not opposed to it. We talked about me moving first, and her staying until she found work there. Neither of us were very fond of this. We talked about maybe doing some long-distance thing too, no dice. Throughout this all, there was no animosity on her end. No drama, no hatred. She told me she felt bad several times because she knew I was staying in a place with bad job prospects for her. I told her that was not the case several times. Last week, they made a really competitive offer. Full coverage of my relocation, large sign-on bonus, great perks. I hesitated to accept since I wanted to talk with the fiancé about it more, but she encouraged me to take the job and we would figure out what to do from there. I think it all came down to the fact this last month has illustrated something we both didn't really want to realize, where we see ourselves in 10 years is not the same. She wants to stay here, be with her friends and family, raise kids in her hometown. I want to be somewhere else. Even if I didn't get the job offer, it did not change the fact I didn't want to live here long term. I'm willing, and able, to move around for work. I don't have the same need to live around my family here. There's much more to this than just one aspect of life, there are at least a dozen we've realized we don't match on. But, I don't feel like getting into it. So, last night, we talked again. We agreed it was best for me to move and start my new job. We had put the wedding plans on hold anyway when I got laid off, so it's not like we're canceling anything. We're going to trickle the news out over the weekend. I love her, and I know she loves me. She's my best friend, and she made it clear that won't change. But still, this sucks so much. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is quietly devastating, not in the explosive, scandalous way that many relationship breakdowns are, but in the slow, bittersweet unraveling of two lives that were once so deeply intertwined. It's not about betrayal or toxicity. It's about love, maturity, and the painful realization that compatibility is about more than just affection and time. It's about long-term alignment, and sometimes, no amount of love can bridge a fundamental divergence in life paths. At its core, this breakup is a story about divergence, two people who deeply care for each other, but who are ultimately oriented toward different futures. What makes this story particularly poignant is the absence of blame or anger. The narrator isn't vilifying his ex-fiancée, and she isn't holding him back. There's no screaming match, no impulsive decisions, no third-party betrayal. It's the kind of breakup that doesn't happen because something went wrong, but because everything else moved forward and the relationship couldn't go with it. This couple did everything right. They had the hard conversations. They made plans. They were transparent with one another. They even encouraged each other to chase what was best for themselves individually. That level of maturity is rare, and it's what makes the loss so much more difficult. There is no emotional safety net in anger or resentment, only the ache of knowing that someone you love deeply and sincerely just isn't meant to be your lifelong partner. The story is also layered with themes of sacrifice, self-realization, and the limits of compromise. For the narrator, the last year has been one of stagnation and discomfort, losing a remote software job and returning to an industry he had hoped to leave behind. That limbo pushed the couple into existential questions about their future. Where do we live? How do we prioritize career versus family? What does permanence look like for each of us? While his fiancée was rooted to job security, family ties, emotional familiarity, he was adrift, needing the flexibility to go where the opportunities are. Their respective visions for the future were no longer in sync, even though their hearts were. There's also an unspoken tragedy in how time factors into all of this. 6 years together is not casual, it's significant. It's long enough to make someone part of your identity. Long enough to plan a life and imagine a future. But as often happens, the test of a relationship isn't just how long you've been together, it's whether your shared dreams can continue to evolve alongside your individual ones. In this case, they couldn't. The job offer becomes the narrative fulcrum, the turning point that forces a theoretical conversation into real-world consequences. It's a moment of clarity. The offer is more than just a professional opportunity, it's a symbol of change, a harbinger of the inevitable. The narrator doesn't just have to decide whether to accept a job, he has to decide if he's willing to reshape his entire life, or ask someone else to reshape theirs. And he chooses, heartbreakingly, to let go of a relationship rather than live in a place or a life that he knows isn't right for him. In the end, this story is about the hardest kind of love to lose, the kind where nothing is actually wrong, except the fundamental direction you're both going. The kind where mutual respect and affection still exist, but aren't enough to counterbalance the reality that love alone doesn't sustain a life together. There's a deep emotional intelligence in how the narrator frames the experience, no histrionics, no scapegoats, just grief and gratitude coexisting. He isn't just mourning the loss of a fiancé, he's mourning the loss of a best friend, a shared vision, and the version of his life he once thought he was building. And perhaps most heartbreakingly of all, he's also mourning the loss of simplicity, the hope that love would be enough to solve the problem of what comes next. It's a quiet, slow heartbreak, but no less powerful for it. I think my husband is a fork thief. This is a throwaway, but I need to get this out there. I, 43F, think my husband, 55M, is stealing forks from other people's houses. Why would he do this? I have no idea. He's always been a little loose with taking things. But it usually was low stakes. A coffee table from his dorm room that was already getting new furniture when he moved out. A frame from the art store where he worked, because it was cracked on one side and was getting thrown out anyway. A single spoon from the restaurant where I worked, as a memory because we loved the soup. When new forks started appearing, he explained that they were left at the office by coworkers and never claimed. So he'd use one and bring it home to clean it, then never take it back. At first, I thought having lots of different forks was fun. Quirky. Eccentric. The kids and I nicknamed them. The one with Art Deco designs is Roaring Twenties. The one with a rose at the end is Kiss from a Rose. One with particularly long tines is Throat Stabber. And we all have our preferred forks and sometimes fight over them. But last week, a new fork appeared out of nowhere. He doesn't go to the office anymore, so it couldn't have come from there. I really like this new fork and I haven't named it yet. It has a nice weight to it, good heft. The tines aren't too long, and they're perfectly spaced for spearing. It's probably a dessert fork, I guess. I don't know silverware, which is nice for my smaller hands. I asked my husband where it came from, and he said he had no idea. Maybe it just got shuffled in with the other forks from the office. I decided to let it go, probably because I like the fork. Does this make me complicit? Maybe. This morning is when I am seriously considering we have a problem. Because yet another fork appeared. This one is a lot like the last, similar engravings on the handle, but not the same design. Unlike my new favorite, this one is a regular-sized fork. Still, I thought maybe they're the same fork, my new favorite, and this one. But I got them both out, put them side by side. Different forks. My husband went to a friend's house to hang out last night. Did he take it from there? My mind is whirling with possibilities, so I did the very un-Reddit-like thing and just asked. Hey, this is new. Where did it come from? And he shrugged. No idea. I said, okay, well, that's weird because I didn't bring it in. Our younger daughter didn't. Did our older daughter? And we kind of laughed. But I'm onto him. I just have no way of getting proof. Also, what if I'm wrong? I suck at figuring out when people are lying. Even though I believe my husband is the culprit, here's a list of other potential suspects: our 18-year-old, who sometimes goes to different friends' houses. Our 14-year-old, who never goes anywhere except school. I guess she could be nicking forks from friends' sack lunches? And me. I don't really go anywhere, but maybe I'm sneaking out while I sleep like some kind of somnambulistic cutlery burglar, I don't know. I think it's my husband. As far as I can tell, that's the only explanation. And I can't go around besmirching his good name to our friends and family, so I came here to be anonymous and get it off my chest. If you're missing some cutlery, I guess I can check my silverware drawer for you. Even if it didn't come from your house, there's a good chance I have a match. Let me analyze this story for you. At first glance, this post might read like a light-hearted domestic comedy, a wife writing about the possibility that her husband is stealing forks from other people's homes. But beneath the playful tone and humorous narration lies a deeper exploration of trust, curiosity, and the subtle disorientations that accumulate over time in long-term relationships. The fork mystery isn't really about forks. It's about that peculiar, low-stakes unease that arises when you notice something off in the behavior of someone you thought you knew inside and out. Over time, tiny inconsistencies begin to take on outsized emotional weight, not because they're threatening, but because they're unexplained. The narrator's tone is both whimsical and wary. She opens with a question: why would he do this? Framing her husband's potential fork theft as both baffling and oddly believable. She catalogs his past history of harmless theft, softening it with rationalizations. The coffee table was going to be replaced, the frame was cracked, the spoon was sentimental. This background matters not just for context, but because it shows us how deeply she wants to believe he's not doing anything truly wrong. There's a quiet desperation in the way she defends him at first, still loyal, still generous, still looking for the most charitable interpretation. But the repeated pattern, especially now that he no longer goes to the office, pushes her toward a troubling possibility. Maybe she doesn't know everything about her husband after all. What's striking is how this seemingly absurd story reflects a universal marital experience. The moment when you begin to question something about your partner that you've always overlooked, dismissed, or quietly accepted. The new forks arriving in the drawer serve as a tangible symbol of something intangible, the creeping sense that your partner might have habits, quirks, or even secrets you're not fully privy to. And this is delivered not with melodrama, but with dry humor and subtle self-doubt. The narrator admits she could be wrong. She even questions herself as a suspect, half-jokingly wondering if she might be sleep-stealing forks in some fugue state. This blend of suspicion, humor, and humility is what makes the post feel so deeply human and believable. The family's naming of the forks, throat stabber, roaring 20s, kiss from a rose adds a layer of quirky, affectionate intimacy to the narrative. This isn't just about theft, it's about how mundane objects, especially in a household with children, take on stories and identities of their own. These forks have become minor characters in the family's life, complete with personalities and rivalries. The kids fight over them. The mom picks favorites. In that way, the forks serve a double purpose. They're both the source of mystery and the embodiment of shared domestic life. That the narrator likes the new fork, despite its dubious origins, highlights a very human moral flexibility. She might be disturbed, but she's also enjoying the benefits. She wonders aloud if this makes her complicit, and it's both funny and telling that she seriously considers that question. But the emotional undertow arrives in the final paragraph. The narrator clearly suspects her husband but is reluctant to say it out loud. She doesn't want to accuse him, doesn't want to besmirch his good name, and instead chooses to voice her suspicion anonymously on Reddit. This reflects a delicate marital boundary, the space between what we suspect about our loved ones and what we're willing to say to their faces. Her decision to come here, to a place of strangers, is not about outing him, but about finding a safe place to express uncertainty. The post becomes less about forks and more about needing affirmation that it's okay to be confused, even in a loving relationship. That it's okay to notice something small and weird and want to understand it, without that meaning your entire marriage is unraveling. In the end, this post is a brilliant slice of modern domestic writing. It's humorous, poignant, and emotionally honest. It explores themes of intimacy, ambiguity, and the small cracks in the everyday fabric of a life shared with someone else. It makes us laugh, but also reminds us how much we want to believe we truly know the people we love, even if sometimes they might be secretly collecting other people's forks. My job is really taking a toll on me, so much that I actually booked an appointment to get professional help. This is gonna be a long post. I just really need to let it all out. And also, English is not my first language, so please bear with me. I'm a newbie nurse working at a private hospital in Caloocan City, Philippines. I know we all reach that point where work gets really hard, and I know it's totally normal to feel that way. I mean, who really wants to work anyway? Ha ha. But I don't think it has to reach to this point where I would need professional help. Anyway, here's what's been happening. I've noticed some changes in myself these past few weeks. I've been getting way more emotional when it comes to work. I'd break down before my shift, after work, and sometimes even while at work. I'd go to the restroom just to cry. I'm not really the type to open up, but lately, I've been reaching out to close friends because I honestly don't know what to do with what I'm feeling at the moment. It even got to the point where I vented to my mom, telling her how I'm really struggling and that I feel like I'm getting depressed because of work. I've always considered myself more of a homebody, not someone who likes going out, but recently I've been asking friends to hang out on my days off, or I'd tag along with my mom on her errands, just so I don't have to stay home. Being at home feels too quiet and it makes me overthink even more. That's so new to me, 'cause I used to love being alone, especially at home. But now, I hate the feeling of being alone. It makes me feel like I'm going crazy. I'm really at my lowest, and people around me are starting to notice too. I've had coworkers ask me if I'm okay 'cause they say my vibe feels different. One time, a friend messaged me out of the blue asking if I'd been crying or if something was wrong. She saw a photo of me with friends and said my eyes looked so sad even though I was smiling. When it comes to skills and my coworkers, everything's good. All my senior nurses are kind and patient. They're the ones who taught me everything I know now. They've been really helpful when I had questions, and I know for sure that my skills aren't the issue. I don't get complaints during evaluations. In fact, they even said that I'm a fast learner and they trust me to handle things on my own. I've never made any serious errors or gotten any incident report. The main problem is the company itself. It's their expectations and their complete lack of empathy for their staff. Like one time, I had to stay 2 hours overtime because of a sudden direct admission right at the end of my shift, plus a hypotensive patient, BP was 80/40, another patient in the middle of a blood transfusion who suddenly had chills, and a pedia patient who was super agitated and at risk of seizures. After all that, I was told my OT wasn't valid because the nurse-to-patient ratio was still okay. Our hospital has a 1:8 nurse-to-patient ratio, and the census wasn't that high. That's just one of the many OTs I wasn't allowed to file because of the same reason. And just recently, they even cut 30 minutes from my 1 hour and 30 minutes OT pay, saying it might get questioned. Imagine, just 30 minutes and they still wouldn't give it. And that's just a few of the things we go through. To give you an idea of how bad it is, more than 10 employees submitted resignation letters just this June alone. I know one of the easiest solutions is to quit, but it's not that simple. First of all, I'm a newbie. A lot of places are looking for nurses with experience, and it's not that easy to find a new job right away. Another reason is the salary. It is actually higher than what a lot of other hospitals offer. I don't come from a well-off family, so this kind of salary really means a lot to me. But sometimes I find myself asking, is it still worth it if it's at the cost of my mental health? So now here I am, booked a session for psychiatric help because I just haven't been feeling like myself lately. I don't recognize myself anymore. But honestly, I'm still hesitating. I'm scared of what might happen or what I would find out about myself during this session. Let me analyze this story for you. The story opens with a gentle self-effacement. The writer prefaces their post by warning that it's long and apologizes for any language mistakes, which immediately establishes a voice of vulnerability and humility. This tone, open, but a little guarded, mirrors the emotional state the narrator is in. They're reaching out for support, but cautiously. The act of sharing such a personal struggle online, anonymously, speaks to how isolated they must feel in real life. This framing signals to the reader, I need help, but I don't know where else to put this pain. From the very beginning, the emotional stakes feel incredibly human. As the narrative continues, the writer describes their context, a newbie nurse at a private hospital in Caloocan, Philippines. This detail matters. It tells us that the stress isn't just personal, but structural. The healthcare system in many countries puts impossible pressure on nurses, and here we have someone just starting out, already being ground down by the emotional and physical demands of a job that is supposed to be about care. The irony is cutting. The job of healing others is making this person sick. And yet, the narrator almost minimizes their distress by joking, who really wants to work anyway? Haha, a self-protective bit of humor meant to lighten the dark emotional truth. This job is breaking me. What follows is perhaps the most emotionally raw part of the story, the descriptions of crying before, during, and after work. This is not just burnout, it's psychological distress. The narrator acknowledges that they've changed, and they don't like the change. The quiet dignity of those restroom cries is particularly affecting. They're not storming out or making a scene, they're stepping away, hiding their pain, trying to hold it together. Even more heartbreaking is the shift in how they relate to solitude. Once a comfort, being alone now feels dangerous, like it might unlock a flood of thoughts they can't handle. This inversion speaks volumes about the severity of their emotional state. When silence becomes your enemy, something has deeply shifted inside you. The reaction of the people around them, friends who notice sadness in their eyes, co-workers sensing a different vibe, is poignant. It underscores that the narrator is not imagining their suffering. It's visible. It's bleeding out into the social fabric around them. And yet, even with these red flags waving clearly, the narrator still doubts themselves, still wonders if they're overreacting. This is such a painful hallmark of mental health struggles, the constant gaslighting of the self. You feel terrible, but you question whether you're allowed to feel terrible. Next, the narrator shifts to the one part of the job that isn't making them miserable, the work itself. They make it clear that they're competent, supported, and respected by their peers and seniors. This is a crucial point. So many stories of job-related burnout focus on interpersonal conflict or incompetence, but not here. The emotional pain isn't coming from failure, it's coming from a system that dehumanizes even its best workers. That distinction adds moral weight to the story. The narrator isn't weak, unqualified, or unlucky. They're simply caught in a toxic, uncaring structure. The emotional climax of the story comes in the retelling of the overtime experience, multiple critical patients, 2 hours of extended work, only to be told their labor was invalid, not worthy of compensation. This is the heart of the conflict, the absolute erasure of humanity in the name of bureaucracy. The logic is maddening. Even after giving extra time and emotional energy in a crisis, the company decides their suffering doesn't count because ratios were okay. It's one of those moments that makes you want to scream on the narrator's behalf. And what's worse, it's clearly a pattern, one of many indignities that employees are just expected to swallow. Despite the pain, the narrator doesn't present quitting as an easy solution. They offer a rational, grounded explanation for staying. They're new, they need experience, and this job pays better than others. This is the trap so many workers, especially in under-resourced professions like nursing, face. The story isn't just about burnout, it's about economic entrapment. The narrator knows the job is harming them, but also knows they need it. And in that impossible space between needing to survive and needing to feel sane, something inside them is breaking. The final paragraphs are perhaps the most emotionally impactful. The narrator has booked a session for psychiatric help, a huge, brave step. But instead of feeling relief, they feel fear. What if they learn something they don't want to know about themselves? This fear of diagnosis, of facing the full truth of their condition, is incredibly relatable. There's strength in the act of reaching out, but also dread. The story closes not with resolution, but with an emotional cliffhanger. They've taken the first step, but they don't yet trust the ground beneath them. In summary, this post is a quietly devastating portrait of burnout, alienation, and survival in a hostile work environment. It offers no neat ending, no moral, no dramatic twist. And that's what makes it so powerful. It's real. It captures the slow erosion of identity that can happen when your labor is exploited, your pain is minimized, and your coping mechanisms begin to fail. The narrator's voice is honest, exhausted, self-aware, and brave. And by sharing their story, they do more than vent, they shine a light on what so many others are silently enduring. Crush and friend got together and are thriving while I'm here trying to not feel bitter. I know this might sound immature, but I don't really have anyone to talk to and I just need to let it out. All my life, I've felt like the third wheel, the supportive friend in someone else's story. And it's starting to hurt more than I want to admit. Last summer, I had an internship. I quickly became close with a group of girls who shared my same interests. We had a lot of fun together, exploring the new city and yapping. At first, the male and female interns mostly kept to their own sides, not out of malice but just different vibes. But there was one guy who started hanging out with us more and more. Let's call him Jay. Jay was ambitious, smart, and confident. The way he carried himself stood out to me. He shared a lot of his achievements, his family-oriented thinkings, and life views. They all resonated with me and I started to admire him, especially since it doesn't seem like he minds getting to know us girls without being weird about it. I slowly developed a crush. At first, I thought maybe he wanted to be friends with all of us. But slowly, it became obvious that he only had eyes for one girl in our group, let's call her Kayla. He'd bring her pastries, said he made them from a company team events and couldn't finish it all. He would also look for excuses to bump into her at her desk. It slowly seems like Jay and Kayla always seem to be together, even outside of the girl group hangout. He really liked her, and honestly I was crushed. It all happened so fast. I admit I didn't really have any relationship experience before, so I didn't know how to process this crush. I just waited around, hoping that I can find the right time like an idiot. But instead of confessing or even pulling back, I did the opposite. I acted as their wingwoman as another girl and I helped him ask Kayla out, working as like double agents. Maybe I thought that since I cannot be with him, I still want to be their friends. They got together 2/3 into the internship. And everything changed. Our group used to hang out together, but after they became a couple, it was like we stopped existing. I tried to be understanding and told myself that of course couples spend time with each other and that is normal. But it still hurt. I just wanted to feel like I still mattered to them, even a little. After the internship ended, I noticed I couldn't find either of them on Instagram anymore, which made me think they blocked me. I tried my best to be supportive throughout, so I'm not sure why. It could be some bitterness have leaked through, but I guess I just wasn't part of their life anymore. Even typing this out, I know how immature I sound, but I have to say what drew off my chest that I wanted to in their world. Recently, I found one of their social media pages. They're still together and actually are thriving with a new launch startup business. This startup idea is something similar to an idea I've had sitting in my notes for months. To be clear, I don't think they stole my idea. Kayla and I shared a lot of similar interests, so I fully believe she pitched the concept, and he helped build it. Still, they're doing so well as their project is getting a ton of traction and setting them up for life. I cannot process why I've been so fixated since I found out that they are doing so well. I keep telling myself that comparison will only hurt me, but I can't stop thinking about them. This isn't the first time I've felt like the extra wheel in someone's story. However, this time, it stings so badly because I have feelings. I keep thinking if only I was prettier, wittier, or that I have found a way to execute my ideas sooner. Now, I feel like they are out of my reach and in a different leagues. I'm sorry for the long post, but I really need to get this off before it consumes me. I'm 24 now and have never been in a relationship before, so all this third wheeling is really getting to me. If you read this far, thank you. It means a lot to me. Let me analyze this story for you. The story begins with a quiet disclaimer. I know this might sound immature. It's a gentle self-dismissal, the narrator trying to brace against judgment while also signaling vulnerability. Right away, we feel the need for connection. This is someone who doesn't have an outlet, who's been holding something in too long. The emotional texture is not immaturity but emotional honesty, and the reader is invited into a confession that's as thoughtful as it is raw. The loneliness bleeds through early. I don't really have anyone to talk to. That line alone echoes through the whole piece. The next paragraph sets up a familiar emotional pattern, being the third wheel, the supportive friend in someone else's life. The language, someone else's story, is striking. It reveals how the narrator sees their own life, as secondary, peripheral, a backdrop to someone else's success or romance. That feeling of being emotionally sidelined is not just situational, it's existential. This isn't about one relationship. It's about a life pattern that has left the narrator feeling unseen and unchosen, which creates a deeper ache than simple jealousy. From here, the narrative moves into the internship, the setting where this most recent emotional wound takes place. The internship provides not only professional experience but also a new social world. The girls bond easily, a found family of sorts. It's important to note that this group is initially a source of joy for the narrator. It reminds us that she is not antisocial or withdrawn, on the contrary, she thrives in friendship and connection. That detail makes the later isolation more heartbreaking. The arrival of Jay marks the beginning of emotional disruption. The narrator is initially drawn to him not for his looks or status, but for his ambition, family values, and respectful demeanor. These are intimate and meaningful qualities to admire, showing that her crush is sincere and emotionally rooted. She doesn't fall for the first guy who walks in, she notices the subtle way he chooses to engage with the group, and more specifically, with her friend Kayla. The admiration is quiet at first, but it builds. Her attraction deepens as she begins to imagine him as someone of substance, not just a fling, but someone who gets her. Then the inevitable shift, he only has eyes for Kayla. The description of his courting gestures, pastries, bumping into her, is subtle but devastating. It's not dramatic, but it's the gradual dawning of heartbreak. The narrator doesn't rage or panic. She watches it happen, powerless, as the invisible boundary between possibility and reality closes. The line "I was crushed" is simple and understated, but it carries enormous emotional gravity because it is so quietly placed. She isn't begging for pity. She's naming her pain plainly. What happens next is a small act of emotional martyrdom. She becomes their wingwoman. This is where the story reveals the narrator's complex emotional depth. Instead of walking away, she chooses to help the person she likes get together with someone else. Why? Because she wants to stay close. Because maybe being near them is better than being entirely excluded. It's the tragic logic of someone who has been taught to accept crumbs in place of affection. This is not immaturity, it's emotional self-sacrifice. And it hurts. Once they're a couple, the social fabric unravels. The group dynamic disintegrates, and the narrator's presence fades into the background. Her feelings are dismissed not by direct cruelty, but by neglect. And somehow, that passive exclusion is even worse. It says, "We didn't even think of you." When she says, "I just wanted to feel like I still mattered to them," it hits like a gut punch. Because isn't that all anyone wants? To feel that their presence has meaning, that they're remembered, wanted, and needed? The next blow comes digitally, they block her on Instagram. The double pain of emotional loss and technological erasure is enormous. Online spaces are not just virtual anymore, they're extensions of our social existence. Being blocked is not just a communication cutoff, it's a symbolic deletion. When she says, "I guess I just wasn't part of their life anymore," it isn't bitter. It's mournful. She's grieving a friendship, a potential romance, a chapter of life that vanished without closure. Then comes the emotional crescendo, she discovers that they're thriving. The couple has launched a startup, one that echoes an idea she had long ago. She's careful not to accuse them of stealing it, which is telling. She's not driven by spite, she's driven by the ache of missed opportunity. Seeing people succeed with a version of your dream, especially people who ghosted you, is like a haunting. She's not just watching them grow together, she's watching them build the future she wanted for herself. That kind of grief isn't jealousy. It's displacement. She ends with an unvarnished self-assessment. "I keep thinking if only I was prettier, wittier." The pain here is rooted not just in romance or lost friendship, it's in a deeper belief that she isn't enough. That she has somehow failed to be worthy of love, success, or presence. These are dangerous, self-eroding thoughts, and the narrator is clearly battling them with every line. The most devastating part might be the quiet despair when she writes, "I'm 24 now and have never been in a relationship before." Not because there's any shame in that, but because to her, it feels like yet more evidence of her outsider status. Her sadness isn't about relationship status. It's about wanting to be wanted. In summary, this is not a story about immaturity, as the narrator fears. It is a story about emotional displacement, the ache of invisibility, and the long-term grief of always being the supporting role in someone else's spotlight. It is also a meditation on identity. Who am I, when my ideas go unrealized, when the people I love move on, when I'm quietly removed from the narrative? What makes this piece powerful is its restraint. The narrator never wallows. She's honest, careful, even empathetic toward the very people who hurt her. That makes the heartbreak more poignant, because she's not asking for pity. She's asking for recognition. I'm quitting porn. I've been watching it for years. I don't think I'm addicted, but I don't like how it feels when I use it. Last night I downloaded one of those AI chatbot apps that advertises itself as having no filter, and I sexted with an AI. 4 hours. I lost time that I wanted to spend on personal projects and I lost sleep because of it. I spent 4+ hours of my evening saying disgusting things to encode algorithm and I feel awful because of it. I've always thought that integrating AI into porn was an awful idea bound to have horrible consequences, but there was no stopping the industry. It feels like a super potent drug. I tried it, it was amazing, but it wasted so much of my time and energy and the next day I feel awful about it. That was just the straw that broke the camel's back. For years now I've had a throwaway Reddit account literally just for porn. I would browse porn subreddits, I'd save the ones that I really liked, and I'd keep browsing. I checked today and I think I had over 500 saved posts. Just seeing that and realizing that really made me rethink if I truly wasn't addicted or just in denial. Before that, I've watched so much porn on various sites. I had a note in my phone of my favorite porn stars because I didn't want to create an account to save the videos. It's also just an awful industry of rape, drugs, abuse, and underage girls. I don't want to support it, and also being exposed to that kind of energy, I feel it slowly turns me into a much worse person as my internal thoughts about the women in my everyday life are full of nasty, disgusting things that I would never utter out loud, but I don't feel like it makes me any better of a person to be thinking them in silence. If the people in my life knew the kinds of things I keep thinking about them, I would lose so many friends. I want to be a clean and virtuous man. I want to find an actual meaningful relationship where I can safely have those intimate experiences with a woman I love instead of flashing pixels of 2 actors paid to fuck each other. I want to be responsible and not rely on vices to make me feel good. I've gone through this process of acknowledgement and action with my edibles a month ago and I think it's time I go through this with porn. I have logged out of my NSFW Reddit account and all the saved posts. It was a throwaway and the password is long forgotten, probably was a keyboard smash anyways. I have deleted my note of my favorite porn stars. I have entirely wiped the AI chat app off of my phone and, if I'm able, I plan to restrict downloading it with a keyboard smash password. And I plan to restrict as many porn sites as I can from my Safari with a keyboard smash password. I don't need this. I don't want this. I'm better off without it. I'm getting rid of it. Let me analyze this story for you. The first paragraph introduces the decision with a powerful simplicity: I'm quitting porn. There's no dramatic flair, just clarity. This opener already sets the tone. This is not a confession aimed at eliciting guilt or sympathy, but a sober, determined reckoning. The narrator immediately rejects the label of addiction, but then admits discomfort with how it makes them feel. That tension between perception and internal reality becomes a major theme. They may not have fit the clinical definition of addiction, but emotionally, they are clearly at a breaking point. The mention of the AI chatbot is especially important. It's the story's inflection point, the incident that pushed the narrator from unease into action. What's striking is not just what they did, but how they reflect on it. The shame is immediate, raw, and self-aware. I spent 4+ hours of my evening saying disgusting things to a code algorithm. That sentence carries more than regret, it carries revulsion. Not just at the act, but at how easily they were pulled in. The self-disgust comes not from prudishness, but from a profound sense of misalignment between who they want to be and what they found themselves doing. It's like waking up after a blackout and realizing you were someone else for a night. There's also a striking shift in tone here, from personal shame to social concern. I've always thought that integrating AI into porn was an awful idea bound to have horrible consequences. The narrator is not just reacting to what happened to them, they're observing a broader cultural collapse, a technological shift that feels like a super-potent drug. That metaphor is powerful. It casts AI porn not just as a novelty, but as something inherently dangerous. Something engineered to be irresistible, but fundamentally dehumanizing. The next paragraph expands this shame into the past. Suddenly, this isn't just about one night of AI-fueled sexting, it's about years of habitual consumption. The narrator recalls the throwaway Reddit account, the saved posts, the folders, the notes in their phone. All small acts that add up to a life quietly shaped around a vice. And here we see another powerful emotional shift, denial unraveling. The narrator begins to realize they weren't just a casual viewer. They were organized. Invested. Maybe even dependent. That realization is crushing, but it's also liberating. It's the hinge moment between secrecy and truth. Then the post takes an ethical turn. The narrator pulls back the curtain not only on their behavior, but on the industry itself. It's also just an awful industry of rape, drugs, abuse, and underage girls. There is deep moral disgust here, not just with the product, but with its implications. This is not a man who simply wants to feel better. This is someone who is coming to terms with the idea that their consumption has real-world consequences. That every click supports a system of exploitation. The line about how this exposure slowly turns me into a much worse person is brutally honest. It's not just what they watched, it's who they became. The mention of intrusive, degrading thoughts toward women in real life hits hard. It is not a boast, it is a confession. And it is an act of courage to say, this darkness lives in me, and I want it out. The emotional depth deepens here. The narrator imagines what would happen if the people in their life knew what they were thinking. That's a haunting idea. It goes beyond shame, it hints at moral self-exile. The pain isn't just about secrecy, but about a fracturing of identity. I'm someone they care about, but if they saw this side of me, they wouldn't. That's not self-pity, it's the voice of someone yearning to be whole again. Then, something beautiful happens, a shift from despair to vision. I want to be a clean and virtuous man. That sentence radiates with yearning. There is no irony, no cynicism, just a clear, almost old-fashioned moral desire. The narrator wants not just sobriety, but integrity. A return to innocence, or at least to honesty. And there's a tenderness in the next line. I want to find an actual meaningful relationship where I can safely have those intimate experiences with the woman I love. The word safely is crucial. It signals not just physical safety, but emotional sanctity. A desire for connection that is real, not manufactured by pixels or scripts. The mention of quitting edibles a month ago strengthens the narrator's arc. It shows this isn't a one-off impulse but part of a broader inner transformation. They are in the process of reclaiming their autonomy from anything that dulls, numbs, or distorts their sense of self. That's incredibly powerful. This is not a story about repression. It's about liberation. The final paragraphs detail the concrete steps taken: logging out of Reddit, deleting the AI app, erasing the notes, setting password protections. These are not just actions, they are rituals of self-respect. Acts of cleansing. Each step is a symbolic break from the past. The repetition of "I don't need this. I don't want this. I'm better off without it" is not just a mantra, it's a reclamation. It sounds like someone tearing down a wall brick by brick, finally seeing the light beyond it. In summary, this post is not just about quitting porn, it is about reclaiming the self. It is about confronting a quiet, corrosive shame that has built up over years and choosing to be better, to be cleaner, to be more present in life and relationships. It is about naming the darkness without flinching and then choosing the light. The most admirable quality here is not perfection, but honesty. This narrator is not posing as a saint. He is someone who has seen how far he's strayed from the man he wants to be and is taking real steps to close that gap. That is not weakness. That is strength. My best friend of 7+ years blocked me for the second time and it absolutely destroyed me. Hey Reddit, I don't really use this site much, but what happened has been eating me up inside and I just kinda needed to get it out of my system and figured here would be a good place after hearing about this subreddit from YouTube Reddit story videos. Shout out to Smosh and to Hot Takes. Back in 2017 to 2018, while playing Destiny 2 back when it was actually good, I, 31M, along with my friend group at the time met my now ex-best friend, 33M, let's call him G. We had picked him up while looking for people to do a raid and we all clicked. He vibed with our whole group and slowly he integrated more into our gang until he was one of the boys, if you will. G was and still is genuinely one of the best guys I've ever met, a true salt of the earth kinda guy. Over time me and him got to know each other quite well, we'd talk every day, usually play stuff together, typical friend stuff, but we also started to confide in each other a lot, always be there to give the other advice or just be there for each other during a rather tough time. Just kinda be that type of therapist friend anyone could go to speak their mind and feel like their concerns were heard. Me and him were the dads of the friend group for lack of a better term. A major point in our friendship came in late 2021, due to some decisions G made when he was younger that I will not go into detail about here as they are very personal. He had warned us back in 2020 that eventually he would have to go away for a while because of those decisions, and during that time he would obviously be unable to talk or do stuff with us. He regretted the actions of his younger self, came to terms with the consequences long ago and just wanted to be upfront about it with us since we had grown close as friends and felt we deserved to know, which honestly made us respect him more. It was a shock at first, but it didn't change how we viewed him, and in late 2021 he had to leave to start his time away. Because we had become so close over the years, while G was away he had added me to his list of people he'd be able to talk to while he was serving his time. We'd email every week, usually multiple times, and have one phone call, or for 15 minutes we'd shoot the shit and I'd give him updates about how the group is doing, what's been going on, updates and patch notes for the games we played ECT, and I in turn would relay the info about how he's doing and what his thoughts about the game updates and stuff were to the group at large. This went on for about a year until late 2022 when he was released. At this point I feel it should be prevalent to mention, since it will come up in a bit, that me and G had a sort of running joke, or we would be kinda toxic to each other. Crude bro humor I guess would be the term, if that even is a thing. It's not. Some examples. When one of us joined VC, well who TF invited you? Calling each other fuckhead, loser, ECT, in messages or in call. Responding to something small and mundane like dropping a piece of paper with stuff like FFS this is why no one likes/loves you. Or kicking each other/leaving our friend group Discord server as a joke when a joke bombed or someone said something and we'd fake be offended. Blocking each other after someone says something stupid. Everything was said in jest and we never meant any of it genuinely, but over time it started to take its toll and we both agreed to try to refrain from doing it so much, if not just cut doing it altogether. But old habits die hard. Jumping ahead to November 2024, I was looking through my Steam games trying to decide what I wanted to play and noticed G and a few other of our friends were playing Civ 6, a game that we had all tried to play together earlier that year, but I wasn't really vibing with it due to being so used to Civ 5 and was also kind of vocal about my dislike of the game. After seeing them all playing it and was feeling a bit lonely, I thought fuck it, I didn't really give it a fair chance, so I wanted to give it another shot, plus I like doing stuff with my friends, so I messaged him and was like, "Hey man, saw y'all were playing Civ 6, could I join y'all? Or if not, would y'all mind if I hung out in VC and just vibed while I play my own thing and hang with you guys?" He responds with, "Hey, it's our other friend game so I can't add anyone, sorry," which I'm like, alright cool, NP and I are in our Discord and say, "Hey, insert what I sent to G here, would you mind if I joined?" And instead of our replying, G does, and just flat out says effectively, "No you can't, stop asking." I get pissed the fuck off, because not only is he replying to a message that wasn't directed towards him, not only is he answering for our instead of them answering themselves, not only did he just say less than 2 minutes ago to me directly, "It's not my game to decide," but also because we literally had the same exact scenario happen the week prior, if not a few days prior, where I asked her something about a game and it plays out almost exactly the same way. Not to mention after the first time the other week I had messaged him like, "Hey TF, was that about?" And after talking about it, it seemed like we both had solved our issues after hashing it out, but clearly that was not the case. Cut to my mistake. I make the poor decision in the heat of the moment of kicking G from the server after having a back and forth with him in our group Discord text chat. I immediately sent a re-invite to him because I instantly felt regret for doing it after cooling off since I let my emotions get the better of me, but he blocked me before it could send. I'm like, alright, we've done this before, it'll blow over in a bit, we just need time to cool off, everything will go back to normal. Weeks pass. At this point I'm starting to worry because I wasn't expecting things to blow up this way, especially when everyone in our group knows I didn't mean anything by it and we all just chalked it up to me and his running joke, especially since we didn't really do it for a few months. So I asked her if he could send G a message for me since he still has me blocked. I wanted to apologize to him and also thank him for, despite us having our spat at the moment, he still put in a good word for me when the job I applied for called him, since I had put him down as a reference before everything happened and he knew how badly I needed it since I was out of work since the pandemic hit. R said sure and he became my liaison to send him my apology. A week later, around mid-December 2024, G unblocks me and sends me a message along the lines of, "Hey man, I'm glad you got that job. I'm happy you were able to get a win for once since you deserved one after everything. Just because I know you're gonna ask, I'm not gonna be coming back to the group for a while. I kinda just wanna focus on some life stuff, so I'll leave you unblocked, but just give me some space." Hearing from him honestly felt good after all the time since everything happened and I mainly left him alone. Through the rest of December 2024 to around March 2025 it was mainly silence with an occasional, "Hey, hope things are good on your end. K-bite" type message here and there from me or a funny meme I thought he'd like. I did have to break the limit at one point because I wasn't doing so good with their life situation, so I shot him a message saying, "Hey, can you check in on R for me? They're not doing so well and I feel like you would be better suited to suggest some things to him for help because I don't have any good experience other than just being someone to vent to, but you might actually have a really good piece of advice to give, so if you could I'd appreciate it." After that I tried to keep my distance, though a few more just checking in, "Hope you're doing well" posts happen every other month and a half. All the while are now in a better situation was helping me coordinate with G and another friend who I was having some issues with, and it seemed like things were slowly starting to heal and get better between us. That is until a few weeks ago. Around my birthday a few weeks ago, at the time of writing this, I was trying to organize plans with a few friends for the day proper. In my hectic typing back and forth and jumping from one DM to another, I had accidentally typed a message to G thinking they were someone else since they were around the top of my Discord DMs still. After realizing I had hit send, I tried to type up another quick message. "OMG, sorry, I didn't mean to send you the..." But I noticed a pop-up message saying the last one didn't go through due to some connection with the receiver and my heart just sank. I knew that the only reason that pop-up was there was because he had blocked me again, and sure enough my fears were confirmed when I checked, and that was exactly what happened. I don't know when he did it or why. To my knowledge everything was fine on both ends. R had told me not even a week or so prior things were good, so I genuinely don't know what happened or if I did anything. Part of me thinks that G remembered that my birthday was getting close and that I might reach out on or near the day with another message along the lines of, "Hey, as a birthday present, can we be friends again?" Which I won't lie I was thinking about doing, but I chose not to since I didn't want to ruin all the hard work I put in and didn't want to screw up anything. That might just be my insecurities or depression talking, which I struggle with a lot from time to time, but I won't lie, the coincidence and timing of things feels a bit strange. Overall I just feel crushed, defeated, and empty inside. G was genuinely my closest and best friend, and to have our 7+ year friendship end over something small and stupid like this just makes me feel worse, and it kills me inside, especially after things were looking like they were on the path to be mended. If you made it this far, thank you for reading. It feels good to finally just put this somewhere instead of keeping it bottled up and letting the pressure build. I just really needed to just vent. While I hope we can somehow fix our friendship, part of me feels like I should just give up hope and move on since the whole reason all this happened is entirely my fault, but if I can just let it all go, I'll try to move on I guess, but I'll hold on to a little hope that maybe things will get better. On a final note, I doubt you'll ever see this, but if you somehow do, G, I truly am sorry for everything that happened. I didn't think any of this would happen after what happened that day. I let my emotions get the better of me, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't regret it. You were like a brother to me and I loved you. After everything that we've been through, the highs and the lows, all the things we confided in each other, the time you were away, that and I was your connection to the rest of the gang, which I thought made our friendship stronger, to the friend group as a whole that we built over the years with some of the best people I could have ever have asked for to be a part of my life, for all that to end. 7+ years of friendship all because of a stupid mistake I wish I could take back. I can't express how deeply sorry I am. One day I hope we can resolve what happened and that we can be friends again, but that is 100% entirely up to you. I'd love the chance to talk things out, but if you truly don't want to and have moved on, then that's something I'm just going to have to come to terms with, and while it will be hard, in the end it's all due to my actions and I'll have to live with that. Thank you for being my friend these past 7 years. You changed my life for the better, and if things truly end here, if nothing else, I wish you nothing but the best, and I hope life treats you well wherever you go from here. Your friend. Unknown. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a raw, emotionally detailed account of a long-term friendship that slowly fractured under the weight of unresolved tensions, misunderstood intentions, and the limitations of digital communication. It's a powerful narrative that blends vulnerability, regret, and deep emotional attachment, and it offers a striking reflection on how complicated relationships, especially those forged online, can be. Let's break it down in a long-form analysis, addressing the emotional core, interpersonal dynamics, communication failures, patterns of behavior, and psychological undercurrents that define this story. 1. Foundations of the friendship, digital brotherhood and emotional intimacy. Your relationship with G started like many modern friendships, online gaming. What makes this particularly special is how it evolved beyond just a casual connection over shared interests. You became close emotional confidants, what many would describe as emotional best friends or even platonic soulmates. You didn't just share laughs, you helped each other navigate life, pain, stress, and real struggles. The fact that he allowed you to be part of his life during a deeply personal and stigmatized experience, his time away due to past legal issues, speaks volumes about the trust and depth of your bond. Your role as his communicator to the group and as his emotional tether to the outside world likely deepened your attachment and sense of responsibility to him. You didn't just play games together, you carried emotional weight for one another. This sort of emotional interdependence is beautiful, but it can also create a fragility when one side perceives betrayal or abandonment. 2. The communication style, the running joke and the mask of humor. The crude, sarcastic, and toxic bro humor you shared became a recurring theme, a coping mechanism, a way of showing affection while maintaining a humorous, emotionally detached front. However, what's clear is that this style, while once mutual, started to wear thin over time. Both of you acknowledged it, even tried to tone it down, but didn't really change the pattern. Why is that significant? Because humor, especially when rooted in insult or sarcasm, often masks unresolved tension. It becomes a safe way to express resentment or disapproval without breaking the rules of the relationship. In your case, it seems that you both became emotionally tired of the act, but didn't know how to transition the relationship out of that space. So it lingered. This set the stage for misunderstandings to be read in a more hostile or emotionally loaded way than perhaps they were intended. 3. The inciting incident, miscommunication and the breaking point. The November 2024 incident is the key turning point. From your perspective, G overstepped by responding to a question not directed at him and giving you a harsh denial that contradicted what he said moments earlier. Given the buildup of tension and the previous similar situation, this triggered a larger emotional response in you, likely not just because of the moment itself, but what it symbolized, a perceived shift in how he valued or respected you in the group dynamic. Kicking him from the server, even if meant as a knee-jerk emotional reaction, was a concrete action that broke the unspoken rules of your friendship. Even if your dynamic included jokingly kicking/blocking each other, the emotional context had changed. It no longer felt like a joke, it felt like rejection. This incident was your friendship's crisis point, where what we used to be able to joke about no longer applied. 4. Attempt at reconciliation, a fragile, one-sided recovery. After the fallout, you took steps to apologize and reconnect. What's telling is that he responded, acknowledged your apology, and even kept the door open, albeit guardedly. That's a strong indication that he still cared and perhaps wanted to believe the friendship could be salvaged. However, it was clear he needed space, real space, not just fewer messages, but a break from the emotional expectations. While your intentions were good, checking in, sending memes, helping our, etc., your occasional messages may have violated the emotional distance he requested. Even well-meaning contact can feel like pressure when someone is trying to detach or process. This is one of the most poignant tensions in your story. Your pain wanted connection, his pain wanted distance. 5. The second block, finality, confusion, and the grief of ambiguity. The second block, discovered accidentally around your birthday, hits especially hard because it's ambiguous. There's no dramatic confrontation, no message, just silence. It leaves you questioning everything, which is emotionally brutal because there's no closure. It disrupts the healing process. It reopens the wound of abandonment. You even explore possible reasons, e.g., him anticipating a birthday message, but acknowledge these could be projections of your own fear and hurt. This self-awareness is important, it shows emotional maturity, but it doesn't make the pain any less real. 6. Guilt, regret, and the weight of self-blame. A major emotional current here is your self-blame. You repeatedly acknowledge your own mistakes, the kick, the messages after being asked for space, the birthday DM, and express deep regret. While it's admirable that you take responsibility, it's also important to notice the pattern of overowning the blame. Yes, you made mistakes. But relationships are never one-sided. G had agency, choices, and also contributed to the breakdown. He could have communicated more clearly, told you directly what he needed, or given you a more defined boundary instead of silence and a block. Instead, the friendship slowly died of misalignment and quiet withdrawal. Your mourning of this relationship is not just sadness, it's grief, and grief is non-linear, confusing, and full of what-ifs. 7. The letter at the end, a eulogy of friendship. The final section, the letter to G, is beautiful, heartfelt, and painful. It reads like a eulogy not of a person, but of a living relationship that mattered deeply. It encapsulates the depth of your bond and the devastation you feel from its collapse. What makes this letter particularly powerful is that it admits wrongdoing, shows gratitude, leaves the door open without demanding reconciliation, accepts the possibility of permanent loss. This is mature and generous. You're not asking G to forgive you, you're saying you hope he will, but will understand if he doesn't. It's vulnerable and honest, and it brings emotional closure for yourself, even if G never sees it. I got in a crash, humiliated myself at a police station, and somehow got a trophy for it. This happened earlier this year on my first official day as a licensed school bus driver. Actually, scratch that, it happened before my day even technically started. I had just gotten my school bus license less than 24 hours earlier after 7 intense days of crash course training. This was supposed to be my first real pickup. My trainer, a 20-year veteran, was riding along to shadow me one last time before signing me off. Before we even pull out of the yard, he turns to me and goes, "You got your license on you?" Weird question, I thought. In hindsight? Maybe the man felt a disturbance in the force. We leave the yard. I'm driving carefully, about a minute away from the first pickup. Nervous but excited. Feeling good. We approach a T intersection, beside where my poop story would end up happening months later. A pedestrian is crossing in front of us, so I stop and sit there waiting to turn right for a good 30 seconds. Then I let off the brakes, gently tap the gas to roll forward and bump. I immediately think, great, you screwed up the off-tracking and curbed your bus, dummy. Trainer doesn't even pause. Just goes, "Oh my God, we just got hit." Dead serious. Zero hesitation. We step out, and sure enough, a teenager has absolutely stuffed the hood of her Hyundai under the ass of the bus. Her front end is destroyed. The bus looks like it shrugged and said, "You good?" Because it's a school bus, even if it was empty, which we were, we legally have to call it in. Cops must attend every accident involving a bus. No exceptions. So now I'm standing on the side of the road, next to a crumpled Hyundai, while my trainer, total pro, keeps checking on me every 30 seconds. "You okay? You good? You okay? This wasn't your fault." Honestly, he handled it like a champ, but he was clearly concerned. In all those years, he'd never had an accident of any kind. Meanwhile, I'm trying to keep my pilot brain from kicking in, because I've seen a lot worse and I'm already mentally filing this under that was a minor inconvenience. We're outside exchanging info with the teen while waiting for the cops to show, but I couldn't stay there. I actually walked away from the scene, physically stepped out of view and hid near the front of my bus, hands on my head, just shaking it and laughing to myself like, only you. This would only happen to you. Eventually, a cop shows up, clears the scene, and tells us to drive to the station to file everything. We get there. I pull into the parking lot. Crooked as hell. Whatever. Trainer gives me one last warning. Careful getting out. You parked kind of bad. I nod, step off the bus, and immediately eat shit in front of the police station. Hard. Full faceplant. Right onto the pavement. In front of the police station, in front of my trainer. Still technically less than 15 minutes into my career. I hadn't even picked up a single student yet. I look up at him. He's just standing there. Not moving. Jaw slightly dropped. No words. Just pure silent, what the actual fuck energy radiating from his body. And that's when I break. Still lying there, still in pain, just dying laughing. Because what else can I do at that point? Eventually I scrape myself up, limp into the station, file the paperwork, and somehow survive. Got back to the yard, got into my car, closed the door, and laughed hysterically for 20 minutes straight. That kind of broken, wheezing, existential laughter that only comes when the universe pulls your pants down and pushes you into traffic for fun. Fast forward a few months, my trainer ended up using my faceplant as a safety lesson in a company meeting. So now I'm not just a memory, I'm a cautionary tale. And then, because apparently the universe has a dark sense of humor, I won Funniest Story of the Year at our company award ceremony. Sometimes life doesn't hand you lemons. It dropkicks you in the face with the whole lemon tree, and then hands you a trophy for it. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a beautiful collision, pun intended, of chaos, comedy, and self-awareness, unfolding with the kind of timing and irony you usually only find in scripted television. At its core, it's a personal anecdote about failure, but a failure so absurdly catastrophic, so densely packed with misfortune and humiliation, that it transcends embarrassment and becomes strangely empowering. From the opening line, the tone is already dry and self-effacing. I got in a crash, humiliated myself at a police station, and somehow got a trophy for it. It's a title that encapsulates the entire arc in one breath, but still invites the listener to buckle up for the details. The narrative begins right before the narrator's first official day as a school bus driver, and immediately sets up a sense of nervous optimism. They've just completed a week-long crash course training, a term that becomes darkly ironic almost instantly, and now they're ready to prove themselves. The presence of the veteran trainer adds to this dynamic, someone with decades of experience watching closely, the kind of figure who often appears in stories as either a mentor or a witness to disaster. That small, seemingly innocuous moment, "you got your license on you?" lands in hindsight like thunder. It's the sort of ominous question that retroactively feels prophetic, turning the trainer into a silent Greek chorus for the chaos that follows. The crash itself is described with masterful understatement. The narrator thinks they've curbed the bus, only to discover they've been rear-ended by a teenage driver who managed to wedge her car beneath the tail end of a literal tank on wheels. The physical mismatch between the Hyundai and the school bus mirrors the thematic mismatch between expectation and reality. It's not just a crash, it's a metaphorical rug pull. Everything was going fine, and then suddenly, the universe threw its first punch. What elevates this moment is not just the absurdity of the accident, but how calmly the narrator processes it. Their mental filing cabinet immediately labels it minor inconvenience, as if they're already dissociating from the catastrophe to keep from breaking down. But then comes the real kicker, the legal protocol. Because it's a school bus even empty, the police must be called. It's a cruel bit of bureaucracy that adds a new layer of weight to an already heavy morning. The narrator's response to this pressure is both telling and human. They physically step away from the accident scene just to laugh at the sheer ridiculousness of their life. That moment of walking away, hiding at the front of the bus, hands on their head, shaking with disbelief, is more than comic relief. It's a rare and intimate window into someone processing trauma through humor. It's the quiet pause in a comedy sketch, the moment the clown takes off his nose and just breathes. But fate isn't finished yet. Arriving at the police station, the narrator receives one final warning from their ever-patient trainer: "You parked kind of bad." And then, of course, the cherry on top, the faceplant. This isn't just a fall. It's the fall. The narrative culmination of a morning already stacked with professional and personal embarrassment. It's Shakespearean slapstick. What makes this moment brilliant is the way it's handled. The narrator doesn't rush to recover or look for dignity. They lie there, laughing, letting it all wash over them in a wave of absurdity and surrender. It's a cathartic beat that says, "Yeah, okay, I give up. You win, universe." By the time they limp into the station, fill out the paperwork, and eventually collapse in their car in uncontrollable laughter, the audience has taken the full emotional journey with them, from excitement to disaster to cosmic comedy. That kind of laughter, the broken, wheezing, borderline hysterical kind, is so deeply human. It's what happens when life becomes so absurd you can't cry anymore, so instead, you laugh like you're possessed. That moment in the car is the emotional resolution, the closing note of the internal arc, not defeat, not resilience exactly, but transformation. From trainee to survivor. From rookie to anecdote. And then, just when you think the story's over, it becomes legend. The narrator's trainer immortalizes their fall as a safety lesson, turning embarrassment into institutional memory. And months later, they win an award for Funniest Story of the Year, which is not just poetic justice but a kind of narrative redemption. It's the universe throwing a final wink: "Hey, at least we made it memorable." This ending reframes the whole ordeal not as failure, but folklore, a story to be told and retold at company parties, safety briefings, and remember when conversations. What gives this story its power isn't just the sequence of events, but how they're told. The narrator's voice is casual, honest, laced with gallows humor and quick wit, but never mean-spirited. There's empathy in how they talk about the teenage driver, respect in how they describe their trainer, and not an ounce of self-pity in how they process their own downfall. It's storytelling that wears its wounds proudly, as if to say, "This hurt, but look how ridiculous it was." On a deeper level, it touches something universal, the feeling of trying to start fresh, only to immediately trip over your own shoelaces in front of everyone. We've all been there, metaphorically or literally, on a first day, desperately trying to look competent, only to have the universe remind us that we're human, fallible, and often hilariously unlucky. But very few of us turn that kind of moment into a story as well-paced, sharply observed, and oddly uplifting as this one. In the end, it's not just about falling, it's about how you laugh when you get up. Or at least how hard you laugh while still lying face down on the pavement. And that, ironically, is what makes this story such a win. I had to cut off someone I thought was a friend after learning who she really was. TW children abuse, miscarriage. I'm 27, F, and we'll call her Rebecca, 30, F. I met her through my husband. We live in a small Indiana town, so carpooling helps. One day our tire blew out, and while my husband was trying to find a ride to work, Rebecca offered. She lived 10 minutes away and said she'd carpool for $40 a week. It seemed like a win-win. My husband mentioned she wanted to be friends with me. She'd help him with errands and meds. I'd peek out the door and say hi, but I'm not the type to open up right away. Still, I was open to the idea. On a non-rent weekend after their shift, we decided to hang out and smoke a little devil's lettuce. I dressed nicely, like it was a real outing. I wanted to make a good impression, see if we clicked. Red flag number 1, I fell down the stairs and twisted my ankle. After a minute to gather myself, I greeted her, but she was on the phone with her husband, who's in jail. My husband had told me her man was in jail for things that mean you'll never be around kids again. I didn't judge. Not my man, not my problem. During the hour-long ride, I asked about it. She said she was asleep when the cops came with a warrant. Her man was locked in their shed. Cops used dogs, broke the lock, arrested him. She got arrested for hiding a fugitive. She later said she had cameras around her house to monitor her kids. I asked why she didn't show the footage to prove she didn't know. She just shrugged and said she'd plead guilty and move on. I didn't get it. She told me her kids were taken and she didn't know when they'd be home. I sympathized. I miscarry triplets, I know what it's like to feel that void. But then she said she couldn't relate to my trauma because she had a perfect childhood. Then turned around and said she gave her kids up for adoption because they were carrying waste buckets to the river behind their trailer. None of it made sense. After the ride, I couldn't shake the feeling. I Googled her. I found a news article from last year. Her man was arrested on sentence to 4 years and never be able to see his kids or others. She was charged with obstruction. I asked her about it. She said people turn their backs when they find out. I let it slide, but I never felt right about it. Then I remembered she had court in June. I looked her up. There it was, attempted level 5 felony. So you're a liar too? I kept searching. That's when everything changed. She has pending charges involving minors. Charges that mean she'll never be allowed around children again. I thought about how she cried over missing her kids, about wanting another baby. How she acted like a teenager, not even goofy, just emotionally immature. She treated my husband like gold, but acted like I wasn't worth the dirt on her shoes. Her husband pled guilty. Now they both face new charges. I feel sick. I feel fooled. I feel like I let someone near my home who never should have been there. I've completely cut her off. But there's still that tiny piece of me that feels guilty, like I've become just one more person who turned their back on her. But maybe some people don't deserve your loyalty. Let me analyze this story for you. This story begins with a deceptively simple act of kindness, carpooling, and slowly spirals into something dark, unsettling, and deeply personal. Right from the start, the tone is cautious yet open. You describe Rebecca as someone your husband knew, and in a small town where resources like transportation are communal necessities, it made practical sense to accept her offer. It's a relatable, almost mundane setup, one that subtly reinforces how easily dangerous people can drift into our lives disguised as helpful neighbors or friends of a friend. The first emotional hook isn't alarm, it's vulnerability, as you're trying to be polite, make an effort, and even dress up to meet someone halfway. This humanizes you immediately and sets up a stark contrast with everything that follows. Your first direct interaction with Rebecca is marked by physical pain, twisting your ankle, which seems symbolically appropriate. The whole encounter is laced with discomfort. As you gather yourself and try to engage, she's already emotionally elsewhere, on the phone with her incarcerated husband. This moment isn't just awkward, it's telling. Her attention is divided, her priorities elsewhere, and her explanation for his imprisonment feels vague and suspect. The detail that he was hiding in a shed, and that she got arrested for obstruction, is delivered like small talk. It should be shocking, but her flat tone and your hesitation to pry further speak volumes about how people sometimes downplay red flags when trying to give someone the benefit of the doubt. The contradictions in Rebecca's story start piling up almost immediately. She says she has camera footage that could exonerate her, but chose to plead guilty. That alone reveals a chilling apathy or deeper complicity. It's also manipulative. By refusing to clarify, she leaves everyone else stuck between suspicion and sympathy. This moment reflects a broader theme throughout the story, your internal tug-of-war between empathy and instinct. You want to believe her. You want to see the best in someone who claims to be struggling. But her story never adds up. Your own pain, miscarrying triplets, is introduced next, and this is where the emotional contrast cuts deep. You open yourself emotionally, share your trauma, your unimaginable grief, and Rebecca shuts it down. She claims a perfect childhood, invalidating your pain, only to contradict herself seconds later by describing a nightmarish scenario of her children carrying waste buckets behind a trailer. The emotional whiplash here is more than jarring, it's manipulative. She positions herself as both victim and someone above victimhood, depending on what suits her in the moment. This scene is where Rebecca's mask really starts to slip, and you, the narrator, begin to question what you're actually dealing with. The turning point is when you follow your gut and start digging for the truth. Your suspicion leads to hard facts, an article confirming Rebecca's criminal history, her partner's conviction, and most importantly, her own pending charges. This is the moment where intuition meets evidence, and the tone of the narrative shifts from confused sympathy to betrayal and horror. It's not just about what she did anymore, it's about how thoroughly she deceived you. There's a specific kind of shock that comes from learning someone's whole identity is built on lies, and you express that disorientation and disgust with clarity and control. Even more haunting are the pending charges involving minors. This crosses a moral threshold that cannot be ignored. You go from feeling weird around her to realizing she is dangerous, especially around children. Suddenly, everything she said, crying about missing her kids, talking about wanting another baby, takes on a disturbing, sinister edge. The emotional immaturity you observed earlier now reads like stunted, manipulative behavior. Her kindness toward your husband and coldness toward you seems strategic, even predatory. You're no longer dealing with a quirky neighbor. You're confronting someone you wish you'd never allowed near your home. Despite the horror, your story is grounded in a deep, painful self-awareness. You cut her off, as anyone would, but still wrestle with guilt. That quiet line, like I've become just one more person who turned their back on her, speaks to your emotional depth. You don't make excuses for her, but you acknowledge the humanity in feeling conflicted. That guilt is what makes this story land. It's not just about rejecting a predator, it's about the psychological residue of trusting someone who never deserved it. You don't end with triumph or vengeance. You end with a hard truth: maybe some people don't deserve your loyalty. This closing line is profound. It doesn't come from a place of bitterness, but from growth. It's the final realization that empathy must have boundaries, that some bridges burn for good reason, and that protecting your peace is not cruelty, it's survival.